So Chassidus talks about the concept of a mamutza. Now, why does the Eibishter need a mamutza? He doesn't need a mamutza, interface, as they say today, but we do. Because for us, it's impossible to understand how we, which are mere mortals, Gvul, Nevroim, how can we connect to a Beida that's Bli Gvul and beyond Bli Gvul, Atzmus? So for this reason, the Eibishter created a whole Seder Ishtalshus, a logical structure. Look at it like stepping stones, like climbing a ladder. You know, it says that Frierdiker Rebbe writes that the Baal Shem Tov taught how each Jew can serve Hashem. And the Alter Rebbe taught how each Jew can serve Hashem. Not that we can, but how. And he gave the mashal of a ladder. The Baal Shem Tov provided a ladder, and the Alter Rebbe taught us how to climb the ladder. So all of Chassidus is really teaching us how to climb a ladder that connects such opposites. Beida and Nivra, Gvul and Bli Gvul. All the status, all the differences between us and Elikus. Ultimately, I'm a mitzvah between Mitzias and Elikus. You say, Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, Lias Leis Baruch Dira B'Tachteinu. So the Alter Rebbe, Periklam Advov and Tanya. But if you ask the basic Klotz Kasha, Adira Leis Baruch and Tachteinu are mamish opposites in every possible way. Alter Rebbe says that Tachteinu means Tachteinu, the Helem, Eid and Sofis Baruch, the darkest Helem, Tachtenim, Atachna Shein Tachtel, Matameno, Tilsch, Mole Klippers, Vesita Achra, Chesha, Koflum, Chupel, Atsha, Emrim, Aniva, Afsi, Eid. That couldn't be more antithetical, more opposite than a Diraleis Baruch. And yet that's exactly what the Nesav is, to have this Hepech, that a Welt of Yeshus, a Welt that constantly cries out, Aniva, Afsi, Eid. And we don't need proofs for it. Just look in the mirror or just look at yourself. And I'm not here to offend anybody. But essentially, we're yesh. We're a yesh. You're born, you wake up in the morning, you don't feel Elikus, you feel yourself. You feel you're hungry, you're tired. Then you have to work on it. But the etzem, we're a yesh. But that's the kavanah, to break the yesh, the bittul hayesh, and ultimately, slowly, acclimate ourselves, which means to refine ourselves, zichuch, birur, zichuch, hayesh, until you become a keli, a little elikus, to more and more and more. And this is the ladder we climb. So B'chlolos, Chassidus talks about 3 dargas. Memaleh kalam. So that's the darga of reaching elikus, that's b'erech hanivroim. Memaleh, the asara ma'amoris nivra elam, yehi eir, yehi rakia, the way the elikus is mislabish and manifests in a way that we all can relate to personally. So what does it mean in simple Aveda? Very simple. You eat a meal, you don't just indulge as a yesh, whatever you want. You're hungry. You're not zeil of a seva. You make a bracha. You eat with kavona, shem shamayim. What are you doing? You're saying that God, hazon esakel, bichas hamozon, bichas hanenin. You're acknowledging that the Eibishter gives you life and gives you sustenance and gives you food. So what you're going is you're experiencing Memaleh kalam. That's not just me, and I'm hungry and thirsty and I do whatever I want. No, there's a keyach eliki in every part of our lives, whether it's mazon, lavush, bias, all our needs. And when you recognize that, it's a chiddush. Why? Because a yesh, instead of being aniva avsiye, me and nothing else, you recognize, no, it's coming from somewhere. But of course, once you reach that madrega, Chassidus says, is that all of Elikus? That he's here to sustain us? The ganze Elikus is all about us? It's like a nice madrega to reach, that you don't think that you're self-made, keich v'etzim yadi. You recognize it's keich v'etzim yadi is not correct, but that keich Hashem osli kol ha'chayil hazeh. In other words, it's coming from the Eibishter, but it's still an Eibishter on our terms. He's giving you food. He's giving you chabon achayim mezayna revicha. So Chassidus then introduces step number 2, Sovev kalam. The Elikus, that's hechef havelt. You come to realize, one second, there's a level in Elikus that's not just here for me, but you start appreciating Elokus as an inyan la'atzmei, not just what it does for you, not Tevli, that Göttlichkeit is good for me, but that Göttlichkeit has an inyan la'atzmei. But then Chassidus goes further and says even that's not the highest level, because the Eibusha is not bound to Seva Kalamin. It's Atzmus. Atzmus is legamri shalei berach to everything, and that's the ultimate madrega. You learn the Sichel, the Moshel, and Lekutei Sichos Chelik Vav, Shmois, second Sichel, one of the classics, which I'm sure every Bacher knows, every younger man knows. The Rebbe speaks about Taimei Habriya, the three different reasons for creation. Why did God create the world? And he brings Legala Shleimus Kechesov, that's Darga 1, to reveal the Shleimus of his Keches. Level 2 is Yakiru Gdulase, begin Dishtamuden Bey, that we should know him, that we should recognize him. And level 3 is Nisava Kodesh Baruch Hu Liyas Le'Dira B'Tachten. And it's brought in Sforim, in Eitz Chaim, in Zayar, are the first two reasons. The third reason is a medrash, but that's what Chassidus ultimately embraces. So which one is it? So the Rebbe explains it's exactly that. There's a reasons in Memaleh Kalaman, there's a reasons in Sovev Kalaman, and then there's an Atzmus. The first two reasons have a purpose. Legala Shleimus Kechesov, he says, is Oyer. Yakiru Gdelas is the Keli, like Memaleh Kalaman. And the Sava is L'mayla Mekulam because it B'chlal doesn't have any Tefisas Mokim. He explains there, it's not that we're doing anything for God. God doesn't need us, and yet he still desires. You're familiar with this. So al pi zeh, perhaps you can say that the three lashenas that Rebbe was saying regarding Hey Teves, that it's a date that ultimately would establish and demonstrate. It wasn't yet the Mem Hey, was not yet the Da Notzach, but ultimately would become that. And what the Rebbe says is the three things. That number one, that Adarabah, Chassidus, Chabad, and the Rebbe gets, what do you say, Mer Lebediker, noch mer Lebediker, more alive, and noch mer starker, noch stronger, and noch mer active. So these three Lashenis, if you think about it, Chassidus talks about Chayis, and Keach. That's like the Lashenis here. Chayis is Lebedikait, Keach is Starkait, and is perhaps mer active. So, however you interpret the three madrigas, it's clearly three things. When you say something is alive, more alive, you're clearly saying, I think it's not muted again. Is that possible? Huh?
Continue talking almost like this. Continue talking almost.
Yeah. So, when you say mer lebedika, something is more alive, that's like a chayis pnimi that is causing us to be more alive. It's like a person, let's say, as we go in our lives, do we get more alive or we get weaker? So we don't get, we get more alive, we get more alive, which means that we become, you become more excitable, more passionate, and so on. So that's one thing. So the hashpah of the Rebbe to us, as the years go on, have to be in a way that we feel more alive. A lot of people ask the question, am I really feeling I'm living with the Rebbe? So let's be honest, it's much harder today. It was very easy, relatively, for Gimel Tam, before Chav Zayin that the Rebbe would dance in Chasteda. So to be alive and dance with the Rebbe didn't take much effort. So how do you recreate that now? I'll talk about that in a moment. I first want to say the three Lashenas. The second Lashon was Nachmer Starker. That's even stronger. So Koyach. Koyach is not so much a Pnimi, more of a Makif. So Koyach, no, we say Chayis. Chayis, Chassidus talks about Chayis Pnimi. Koyach is more of a Makif. But it's also a necessary element, because when a person gets stronger, when they get stronger, obviously everything is more, grows. So it's not just being more alive, which is more lebedik, more like you could say more echus and kamus, but more stark, it also means you're a stronger person. So a stronger person actually can lift more, not just the gashmis, but also the ruchnis, can deal with more challenges. And finally, the third thing is active. Active really is actually the most practical. It means you're active. You can be a person that's very strong, and you could be very alive, but you're not active. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of people, Bochum included, that have a lot of potential. They're strong people in many ways. They're very alive, have a lot of chayis, a lot of kayach, but they like to sleep a lot. They're not active. I'm not going to go around the room here and ask how many of you are active, like what are you involved in, and so on. So being active means to make a dira b'tachtenim. It's not just enough to be alive and be powerful. One of the Chassidim once told the Alter Rebbe said to him, you have a meredike meyach, you can be such a lamdan. So he responded, he said, the fact that I could be such a lamdan means I'm already capable. So Alter Rebbe told him, just like a ganif is not someone who could steal, but someone who steals, a gon or a lamdan is not someone who could be a lamdan, but is actual lamdan. So many of us sometimes say, since I'm able to understand and learn, so I'm already there. No, you're not there. A ganif is when you do it, and a lamdan is when you do it. So being active is not just saying I'm a kusha to the Rebbe, but I'm actually actualizing and in an active way doing what he wants me to do. So perhaps that's connected the kavona atzmis of dira b'tachtenim, which is about ma'aseh b'peil, not just basic kavonas, not just that you're strong and that you're healthy and you're alive, but you actually make it into an active experience. So of course the question is, how do we implement that? And I'll soon talk about the other three Lashenis, Ba'uns, Sevishuns, and Durechuns. So when you medayik every word of the Rebbe was basically giving us a formula of how we can, in our own way, make the Rebbe and Chassidus come alive more than ever. And of course, the $1 million question is, how do you do that? How do you do that 26 years since, what is it now? 20, going to 26, 27 years since Gimel Tammuz, 28 years since Chav Zayin Oded. Most of you never saw the Rebbe Begashmias, were born afterwards, or even if not, were young, or babies. So I'll just talk from experience. I remember a group of guys that were going to be the head staff in camp in Montreal. A few years ago, they came, they called me, they want to see me. So they came over to my house, and two of them were going to be the head, three of them were head counselors, two of them were learning directors. And they said that they want to, since they're going to be overseeing, supervising over 500-600 kids in camp, the big achrayis, they want to instill in them a feeling for the Rebbe, for Chassidus. And they just wanted to run by some ideas of maybe how they can do that. So I said, how'd they do it last year in camp, the year before? So they say it's become already this almost mechanical checklist that every head counselor passes on to the next one. You say Yechi in the morning by the flag rising, and the different color war teams are about Chassidus themes. But they say that's also become mitzvah sanoshim ulamod. Everyone's just doing the same thing. And it's not with achayis. It's just like, it's like going through the motions, like lip service that we are very accustomed to doing. Mechanical Judaism. You're familiar with that concept? You go like a robot. So I said, okay, so what are you proposing? So they said to me, they're thinking that maybe they can go back to the sichos of the Rebbe, to Tzivus Hashem. The Rebbe spoke many sichos to the children, and maybe develop that into a whole plan that you can implement day after day during the 2 months in camp. And they started telling me they went through all the sichos, and they have ideas from that. I must say, I was extremely touched by their sincerity and their effort. And I asked them, I said, when were you all born? Everyone was born after Gimel Tammuz. I said, so what drives you? What drives you? Why do you feel the need? Why don't you just go through the motions like everybody's doing? I've been around a long time. I know how it is, what it means to go through motions, And they said, they don't know, they just feel they feel achrayis. They feel achrayis. Children are young children. Those children are younger than them and definitely did not see the Rebbe. They feel they can't go to camp in a good conscience and not do something to give the children achayis. So I saw right there the words that Rebbe said, that's about Memaleh. These guys were like alive. They weren't doing it to be Yetzirah. They really were wanted to do whatever they can. And I told them immediately, I said, the mere fact that you want to do that, and that's what you're committed to, trust me, you're going to be successful. Because your whole point of departure, your initial intention is good, is healthy. And then they pushed. I mean, I didn't have that much time, but since they were so alive, so to speak, with this, Memaleh, as the Rebbe said, noch Memaleh, obviously, inspiration inspires others, it inspired me as well. And so I gave them time, and we sat, and we went through the sichos. The Rebbe, for example, the Rebbe says there in the sichos, the children, he always said, the Rebbe used a language, the Rebbe created a new language. He called the Abish the commander-in-chief, and he said order of the day, and there was the mission, and I don't remember all the Lashonos, but the Rebbe used at least 10, 15, 20 different expressions from military expressions, obviously to apply it to Tzivus Hashem and Aveda Mochama Ruchnis. So I said, why don't you make an order of the day? Just like you have one competition and you have Mishnay's Baal Peh competition, which is over the whole summer or over a series or over one of the periods of the summer. I don't even remember what they call them. I've been in camp in a trip. Oh, there we go. Yeah, for me, it's over 45 years ago, last time I visited a camp. And I visited for my children, but I mean, as being part of it. But I said, so make a mission every day. The Rebbe said, a mission of the day, right? So make a mission every day, in the morning by Shachris or before Shachris, make an announcement that every bunk and whoever gets a higher score, like a competition, you have every day, the order of the day, order of the day, the Rebbe said. Try to find in everything that you're doing for the children, you have their attention. You have them by the davenings, you have them by the meals, you have the learning, the classes, you have the other things, sports and other stuff, trips. That everything, infuse it with something from the Rebbe in these sichos. And we really worked out a whole plan, which I was very happy to help with. And I could tell you after the summer, they came back to me and they said, it was unbelievable. I mean, I give them the credit. I just helped them a little here and there with ideas. It was unbelievable because they themselves lived with the Rebbe. And this is a sichos the Rebbe said 40 years ago, 30 years ago. I remember the last Tzivus Hashem sichos in the Mems and late Mems and early Nuns. We're talking about over 30, 40 years. And here, guys, that Pasha turned it into a living sichos. That children, 500, 600 children through the summer were living with it because the head counselors were living with it and the learning directors. I even gave them idea, to make a little tikkun for my own Avedas, where I never, we all were bored of learning classes. They, of course, always very sarcastically would end the learning class. Learning never ends, if you remember that. That's the only thing I remember from the learning class. Learning never ends. And of course, we couldn't wait till it ends, to be very honest. It was the most boring part. It was a Yetzirah. We did the learning class. I remember as the learning teacher, I said, why don't you go do your thing? We'll do our thing. We won't tell anybody else. Invite them. What do we have to play the game here? So a little tikkun to that, I said to them, you know what? Even the learning classes, maybe you could infuse with some lebedikite, a little creativity. Problem is the learning classes are usually seen as, even though everyone says, Mishnah Baal Peh, the learning is the most important thing. But let's be honest, in camp, it's not necessarily always number one priority. So maybe you can make a little creative, maybe a little challenging to the students, and not just go by the same rules that we do every year just to be Yetzirah. And they did that too. So I don't know if it redeems the troublemaking I did when I was that age, but Al Kaponim, it was a positive thing. So the idea that the Rebbe said, which is connected directly to Hey Teves, to machen as Chabad, Chassidus, the Rebbe noch Lebediker, I saw with my own eyes. So no one can tell me that after Gimel Tammuz, it's not possible. Of course it's possible. It needs work. Of course, these guys were not lazy. They picked up the phone to me. They worked hard at it, and they did it. So there's no excuse. It means being creative. It saddens me greatly. I look around sometimes and I see Bachrim, like your age, younger, older, and their whole chayis, what their lebedikite is? This is more lebediker, is in selling wallpaper or light bulbs or furniture or I don't know what was the last thing I saw. Cell phones on Amazon. So fine, I understand everybody wants to make a few bucks. There's opportunities today. Now they're arguing with COVID, you can make even more money online. What does it pay me? Not because some such madrega. Because here, guys, this were the people that ever inspired most. Bochim, who had no other issues. They had parents that supported them. They don't have to worry about daigas aparnasa. And their chayis is not going at anything that the Rebbe would want. So I'm not trying to criticize them. Everyone, God bless everybody that will become grace and ashirim and give a lot of tzedakah. But that's called more lebedik? She's saying, I hate Teves. How can I, if I'm bringing here, not mention such a thing? The whole Yesod that Rebbe says, Oven machmel lebedik. We'll talk about starker and also mer active. But the first thing is, where's your passion going? So ask yourself your question. If someone were to ask you, what are you most passionate about? And I definitely hope it's not in Dvarim Asurim, even though, unfortunately, that's also possible. But what is he most passionate about? That question, Hey Teves, challenges us. Is it in the Rebbe's Inyanim? Is it in the Rebbe's Teira? Is it the Rebbe's Hafotzes, Chassidus, Hafotzes, Hamitzayim, Mashiach Inyanim? And if your answer is not, I have to say to you, then you got yourself a good Hey Teves to do a little introspection, a cheshbon nefesh, and there you said that. So someone say, what am I supposed to do? Hey Teves, let's start with that. Look where your lebedikite is. Who is your chayis? Where's your chayis? The Rebbe says, Hey Teves is meant to demonstrate as in machmer lebedika, not just as lebedik. So that is the first question. Then we're going to talk about mer starke noch mer starke and noch mer aktiv. So you're not off the hook yet. After passion comes two other things. So there's Memaleh, Sovev, and Atzmus. So we have to go through all three. And then we got to go through the three levels that Rebbe spoke about. Ba'uns, Vishuns, and Durechuns. So so we can all contemplate hefsek ben parsha la parsha and see what we can do about this. And I'm not just saying this in a Tzachos. I really believe that what I say to you, I say to myself. That this is our challenge, and Hey Teves, are we more lebedik? And now it's much harder because the Rebbe is not there, begashmius, and says, makes with his hand like this, everybody starts dancing, or other things that Rebbe did that made everybody come alive. Now we have to make ourselves come alive with the keiches of the Rebbe that are a little more concealed, but they're still there within us. So l'chaim, l'chaim. Thank you very much. Shalom, liberation, atzlacha to all of you. Okay, so now, chevra nefesh.
That's our speech. We're going to sing the.
Ashtage. L'chaim. Guys are saying l'chaim. So the second expression that Rebbe used, is noch mehr starker. Just for those that just coming on, I'm referring to the Lashenis that Rebbe used when he spoke Tezvov Tammuz Tovshin Memaleh, when the news first broke and the Rebbe first was Megala, what was going on with that would ultimately lead to Teves. The Rebbe was responding to the Taina Kavyochel that Chabad, a good Chassidus Chabad, the library of a good Chassidus Chabad, is basically retired and is not as live and is moving away from lively lebedigkeit and starkheit and active, not active. And the Rebbe responded the exact opposite. It gets more alive and more and stronger and more active. So the second lotion the Rebbe used after Lebediker, noch mehr Lebediker, he said noch mehr stark. So stark, what's starker? Strong strength. So as I was explaining before, Lebedikite is more like a Memaleh kalam. It's chayis. You're Lebedik, you're passionate about something. You feel alive. You know, I talk to a lot of shluchim all the time. And all of us in our own shlichus, it's not easy to maintain that type of enthusiasm and passion throughout. Every shliach, the day they go out on shlichus, from the first time they went out, they're going to conquer the whole city. And Einem the Welt, Einem in their part of the world, and the full heights. And as time passes, As one shliach said to me, the trajectory looks like this. You go out, it's like this, and then you get to a place which is called plateauing. You start coasting, which means you maintain. And again, I'm not saying to be negative. It's teva adam. It's hard. You know, the Rebbe would say, but it's established Siri Agudis Chabad. What the Rebbe say? Why is he calling it Siri Agudis Chabad? The Tzeirim are going to become older. Many of those Tzeirim from the beginning are not even here anymore. It became Skenim because the Rebbe said Tzeirim is not just in years; it's in the chayis that you feel young and you feel idealistic and you feel driven. So it's not easy in life to be that. You know, one day you'll see. Right now, maybe you're there. Even though I hear from many Bochum, they feel already they're middle-aged and ready to retire, even though they didn't begin to do anything, but they're retiring already. But the point is, officially, a young person has a lot more enthusiasm, a lot more lebedikai. So what about koyach? What's koyach? So koyach is more of a makif thing. It's not as pnimi as like a lebedikai, but it's nevertheless necessary. You say ben shleishim the koyach, and koyach has many different meanings. So one we could talk about in the context of Chassidus, the Rebbe's in Yonim, is not just the passion we have, but also the starkheit we have. Starkheit can be stolzkeit. Stolzkeit means firmness, ge'en yankiv, where you feel very determined and driven, which is more than just passionate. And driven means that you don't give up, even though when things are sometimes challenging, you dig deeper. Now, this we all know, that Rebbe gave so much of such keiches to us that we should never ever feel that we can't accomplish anything. You could say starkheit is much more than just passion in that sense. So Chassidus, all of us have an Pnimi within us, and we have an Makif. Pnimi gives us chayis in our internal way, things that we do, the passion and the enthusiasm, as I mentioned. But the koyach sometimes comes from a makif that you don't always feel that's within you, but it's always there with you. It's like when a shliach feels that the Rebbe is with him. So even when there's a challenging situation, you know the Rebbe is with him. I'll give an example. I heard from Zalman Posner, Olav Shalom, a shliach for many years in Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, he was already in the 40s, he was here. And I was once sitting with him in a sukkah here in the Crown Heights, sukkahs, with Fabringing, and he told me the following story, that the first time, maybe one of the first times that Frierdiker Rebbe sent him on a shlichus. I think it was to Chicago, somewhere in the Midwest. And it wasn't a permanent shlichus. It was like to go for a few weeks or maybe Merkos. I'm not sure exactly what and he was a bachrol, you know. And he looks at the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe sensed that he is hesitant, he's tentative. He wasn't confident that he can do it. This is the way exactly how he told me the story. He said, Frierdiker Rebbe, of course, was difficult speaking after the stroke. It was difficult for Frierdiker Rebbe to speak, so there was always a masker, a secretary in the room with the Frierdiker Rebbe who would help translate. Sometimes it was the Rebbe even. And the masker would speak, would help translate. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he would speak, in order to help the one who's listening to appreciate, Frierdiker Rebbe would make with his hands a lot. He would use his hands. So descriptively with his hands, it helped explain, it helped communicate what he wanted to say. It's very important to this story here. The Frierdiker Rebbe says to him, again, recognizing that he was like hesitant, Frierdiker Rebbe says to him, as an neshama darf herabkommen lamato. Will sie nicht gehen? And a soul has to come down below. The Rebbe is choosing a neshama to come down below. I've never seen someone with such a grand entrance with so much noise, by the way. The lost secher, so as the neshama darf herabkommen lamato, will sie nicht gehen. He doesn't want to go. Why? Weil eben is lichtig und warm. Because above in heaven is lichtig. It's bright, illuminated, and warm and warm. Und unten is kalt and finster. Below in this world, it's cold and finster and dark. So why would a neshama want to go from a lichtig and warm to a kalt and finster earth? And then Frierdiker Rebbe took his hand. This is how Reb Zalman told me. He was Tutman. What does the Abish to do? How does he get the neshama to want to go down? You know, al korcha chatachai. So the Frierdiker Rebbe took his finger. He said, "Isaiah, mehez the neshama." Adaf Rob came, and he took his finger like this, and he said, "Adaf Rob came." Dort was his varm malichtik and varm, and he started moving his finger like this down. He says he remembers every tenua. The finger was even trembling a little. He said, when the Frierdiker were going down, 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 down. After Robgain, dort was his kalt and finster. And then Frierdiker did like this. Und dorten soll man machen, so werden warm und lichtig. That's what you do. So he right away understood the message. He didn't need the nimshal was clear. And he says he went out from there with such keches, such starkheit. And he never forgets it. He said, over the years, and even with a tear in his eye, he said, there were times, you're always on shlichus, there's always moments where you feel down, you feel challenges, chayvus, expenses, everybody's got their challenges, everybody's got their moods. Things are not always going smoothly. Everyone has their levels of Atzmus and so on. But he says every time that he's in that matzav, ruach, he remembers the Frierdiker Rebbe's finger. This is the words he said. He said to me, I feel that the Frierdiker Rebbe gave me his finger and said, wherever you go, I'm with you. Just hold on to my finger. Wherever you go and get the keyach, the chayis, the starkheit from that. Now, obviously you have to think about this and have a hergish like that. But this is called starkheit. This is not so much Pnimi as in knowing that there's a Rebbe behind you. And even if you don't see it, the Rebbe is giving keiches and starkheit in every given situation. I heard the story from Shliach, Rabbi Shalom Lipsker from the shul in Bell Harbor. Him and his wife was Rebbe Tznechanan. When they got engaged, they went to Yechidus. And I think they told me they had three choices where to go on Shlichus. Before they went to Yechidus, Shalom Lipsker, Rabbi Lipsker tells his wife, he knew she was very emotional and very attached to her family. He said, when the Rebbe tells us where we're going, no hysterics and no emotions, and don't start making a whole scene. Because we want the Rebbe's bracha that we go to Simcha Bittul Levav without any speakers in this. I guess he knew his wife, so he pavoned her. Anyway, well, how things go, they don't usually go by script. So the Rebbe says, Ayr Ort is Miami. The Rebbe chose, your place is Miami. As soon as she heard that, all the promises went through out the window. And she started, she got very emotional, started crying. And Rebbe says, what is it? She says, she wants to go and everything, she's happy to go, but her mother lives here, she's so close to her mother. Just feels that there's going to be a change in her life like that. And the Rebbe smiled with a broad smile, and he picked up his hands and said, what's that? Ich fahr doch mit euch. That's what he said. So of course, Rabbi Lipsker then thanked his wife, because he wouldn't have gotten those aces had she not expressed herself. Ich fahr doch mit euch. This is a, in the short, what means getting keches, starkheit. And the Rebbe says the starkheit wird noch starker. How do you explain that? The noch starker, the Rebbe Gashmis, you don't see the Rebbe saying that to anyone today. So we have to live with the stories and try to internalize it. However, as anyone who's dedicated a little to the Rebbe's work can tell you, that when you work and you really commit yourself, you suddenly see keiches come that you don't imagine initially. The Rebbe said in Tov Shin Chavov, Yud Shvat, very stark aces. So, famous Yaakov Avinu Lei mess. I'll read about it next two parshas from now. Yaakov Avinu Lei mess, and the Gemara asks, V'chichantu lechantayu, Savdu Sabdayu, Kavru Kavrayu, they buried him. They eulogized him. They embalmed him. What do you mean Lei mess? And of course, the Gemara's answer, Mazari b'chaim afu b'chaim. As his children are alive, so too is he. So of course, there's many sikhs on this topic and many different biyudim and so on. But Chavav, the Rebbe said something very unique. He said the following words. The Rebbe said that 16 Yotzidik, 16 years ago, was the Stalkus, Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud, from Chavav. Before Tavshin Yud, the Rebbe said, before the Stalkus, is the Rebbe, he can gain word, give all gain, can sagen was will sagen, can ton was will ton. He was in full control of whatever he wanted to do and say and so on. But behind, this is what the Rebbe said. Listen to this. You can listen to the sikh. It's on tape, I believe. The Rebbe said, aber heint is the Stolian Nuns. If you do what you have to do, Zari B'chaim, and you behave in a way that the Rebbe would want you to behave, and like B'chaim, you're his child, his children, and doing what he would want you to do. So then he lives. And if you don't chaz v'shalom, then he's not b'chaim. Because V'zari is not b'chaim, who gamkin le b'chaim. So now it's totally on us, not totally on the Rebbe. The Rebbe Kav Yochel is up to us. Now you think about this, and maybe you should listen to this, maybe worthwhile. If you think about this, how could you not get a tresel? We're adults here, we're not little children. You were educated, keches that Rebbe poured out, that Rabbeim poured out. Not getting now to a level of education we all received in our system. It's another discussion. But now we're adults. And not many people in this world were exposed to Chassidus and Rebbe. You have 8 billion people and counting. What do you have? What's the percentage? So it's up to you and I whether the Rebbe is b'chaim or not b'chaim. It's simple as fact. It's simple as that. Now, I know some of the theologians and the Grace of my meaning say the Rebbe is alive whether we are doing or we're not doing. But that's not what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said Zari b'chaim. Who b'chaim is totally in Zari b'chaim. So don't give me anything, any terutzim. If you're not doing something that is with those keches of the Rebbe, and we have the kech and the chayes that I said, Lebediker and Starker, we'll get to Mer Aktiv in a moment, then yes, in some strange way, you are compromising the Rebbe's presence in this world. And there's no real other way of explaining it. Because there's nothing else right now. So it's not a pella when the Rebbe said 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, Chav Ches Nissen, the Rebbe said, Ich habe alles getan, jetzt, was mehr kann ich tun, gebe sich über euch. Now, Chaz V'Shalom, the Rebbe didn't mean he's giving us his work. He's giving us the keches to do something that Kav Yochel, the Rebbe, doesn't want to or cannot, or whatever the Havon in that is. So it comes down to a simple thing. You do it, he's b'chaim. You don't do it, Kav Yochel is not. So when Hey Teves comes around, and the Rebbe said Hey Teves is all about, that's the litmus test. The Even HaBeichen of this day is what? Whether Chassidus, the Svarim, the Rebbe lives on, and is more Lebediker, or noch mehr Starker, or noch mehr Aktiv. That's in our hands completely. So you could either ignore it and say, okay, you know what, I leave it up to Bigger G'dei Yisrael. Or we take it seriously. I didn't come to Fabring here just to make a lutzonus. I came to talk about serious things here. That we have real achrayas. I'm talking here to the Kol HaYetzel Mechames Beis David. If it's not you, who will be? And Imlei Achshav Emasai. So finally, the third thing, active. I mentioned before, you could be a Lebedika person, have a lot of passion, and be a Chassidish Bendel and have the whole Hegeshim, and feel that you have the Rebbe's Keches, but you could still sit and you could still be asleep. The Rebbe's final expression was active, mer active. Means it's not just you have the potential, it means you have to actualize it, activate it. And again, I speak to myself just like I speak to you. So I don't want anybody to think I'm talking down to you or talking as if you or anybody listening here is the problem. I think we're all in it together. And you have to ask yourself a simple question. It's 26 years since Gimel Tammuz. Do we feel that the Rebbe is more lebedik and more starker and more active? Are we that way? Do we feel more alive with Chassidus and commitment? Do we feel more keches from the Rebbe? And do we feel more active, Bepel Mamish active? And it's not a difficult thing to measure. This isn't theoretical. It's very easy to go see. You know, Lahavdil, when somebody wants to make an audit in a business, they just have to visit the factory or the business or the company, and you just see what's going on. Are people showing up? And what level of passion and commitment do they have? And how strong are they in their activities? So this is something that we have to make a cheshbon on nefesh, and if not today, when? It's 8 Teves. Now finally, I want to say this, just in case somebody wondered whether it's difficult. I can tell you personally that since COVID, this pandemic, this unshikanish Makif that has taken lives, we know it's not a joke, and it's taken more lives recently, that have touched all of us in many ways. So we know that something serious is happening and it's affecting the whole world, and it's not going away so fast, even though we all wanted to should disappear completely and everyone should have a full shleima, whoever needs one completely, but it's still here. So you have to ask yourself a question, and I ask it every day. What would the Rebbe be saying now? We know what he said every time there was a challenge, whether it was 9/11, well, 9/11 was also after Gimel Tammuz, whether it was after the 6-day war, or was a Memaleh, and the Rebbe spoke about the Welt Shokelzach. Such a thing did not happen in the Siyas of the Rebbe before Gimel Tammuz. Not even close. I mean, there was different things that happened here and there, but not global. And so taking what the Rebbe said, for example, after the 6-day war, we spoke about the 6-day war was definitely a wake-up call on a big level. When I was a kid, but everyone knows what happened afterwards. It was a tremendous inspiration. Basically, the whole Baal Tshuva movement in the way in America grew out of that. So this is a wake-up call, unprecedented. Again, on a personal note, I can tell you, the receptivity that people have now to anything that gives them a little inspiration and kayach and chayis is unbelievable, really unbelievable. So I say to myself, maybe that's what the Eibishter did. You know what? We didn't do much for 30 years in a way that was really creating a tremendous revolution. So the Eibishter sent a disruption, Shein Kamoyu, that everybody now is aware of something, that we're not in control. So we have now an opportunity of a lifetime. I mean, unfortunately, it's coming with pain, but it's an opportunity of a lifetime. We'll talk more about it. How it is because people start complaining. L'chaim. The Rebbe then went on and said, and that's Sichet Teves of Tammuz, Hey, he said the three expressions after he said, noch mehr lebendiger, noch mehr starker, und noch mehr aktiv, he said, bei uns, zwischen uns und durch uns. So, again, 3 Lashenis. What's the difference between Ba'uns and Tzivishnuns? By us and Tzivishn means among us, between us. I thought I did, but okay. I'll get to it in this context here. It's still Megei Lepel. Using the expression I said before about Memaleh Kalam and Sovev Kalam. So Ba'uns, Tzivishnuns sounds very much the Pnimi, between us, among us. Like V'shachanti b'seicham, the Pnimi. We say Ba'uns, it means it's with us, but it could also be in a Makif way. Now, you probably know Chassidus is a mile and a Makif, a mile and a Pnimi. Pnimi is more Frierdiker HaMakabel, which means when a Mashpia, a Rav, is teaching to a Makabel, to a student, if it remains Makif, then he's not going to internalize it. So you need the Tzivishnuns because you need it to be in a form of that enters Bepnimius in who we are. What's the mile of a Makif? The mile of the Makif, that it gives you a Hecher Giluyim, that not necessarily Frierdiker the Makabel, but it's coming on a higher place from the Mashpia. So the Makif is basically more Das Elyon, if you wish, and the Makabel is more Das Tachton. It says therefore that Ba'und is more, he's with us, he's near us, by us, but Tzivishnuns is more Bepnimius. And the truth is, the Chassidus says, when it comes to Lakus, you have both elements. There's always the Koyach HaMahava that's above us and beyond us. And there's the Koyach Pnimi that's Mislabish, Bepnimius within us, Tzivishnuns. I'm not saying it's the only way to explain it, but it's one way to explain it. People would always wonder whether the Rebbe knew what was going on in our personal lives. Makif, no one had a problem with that. The Rebbe knew, but if a Makif, everything. Like a bird's eye view. That's Mitzad Dasari, but was there also a Das Tachton? And there was always the different arguments that we had. Obviously, a Maimon believes that the Rebbe was both. On one hand, there need to be a certain Makif, because it's coming from a higher place, and that's why the Rebbe needed you should send him a duch and report the details. Why didn't you rely on the Rebbe's Ruach HaKodesh? Because that's not how it works. That's to also be in a premise in our terms. At the same time, you also want to have the Rebbe's Hecher Keches, the story of Reb Hillel, Paritcher. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, "Amayim Chassidus," and there's a Tifa Maimon, and afterwards they were sitting at the table. Tzemach Tzedek was there, Reb Hillel was there, and they were arguing Pshat in the Maimon. Tzemach Tzedek said one Pshat. Reb Hillel disagreed, said a different Pshat. He disagreed with the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Chassidim said, the Rebbe said the Maimon himself. He definitely knows what he meant. How are you arguing with him about Pshat? No, same Maimon that he said. Memaleh, it's a Maimon from the Alter Rebbe. Even then, Tzemach Tzedek is a Rebbe. So he said the classic words that Rebbe brings them many times. As the Rebbe sagt, Maimon, das Kinesinos is Sinai. Sometimes the expression Shechina medaberes metegrein, but the Lashon in the Sichos is Kinesinos is Sinai. Aber noch dem, it does totally in Seichel Adam, and Seichel Adam. I could argue with the Rebbe, because now we're not hearing it like Sinai. What does that mean? Not Chaz v'Shalom that he is feeling he knows better than the Rebbe. That's taka the kavanah. That you should use your seichel. That it shouldn't just be the Rebbe's helical words. So the Maimer itself, the actual Lashon of the Maimer is with Tzemach Tzedek said it, but the Havon in the Maimer, now the Rebbe is also in a form of a seichel anushi. It could be a superior seichel anushi, but it's something you can argue with. So if you were sitting now with Tanoim and Amoraim, and just from a Kabbalah sale, everything they said, that's not called limud. Limud means you ask questions and you challenge and so on. Can move on, you accept whatever the Rebbe will say there. But if you don't use your seichel, you're not really doing justice It's actually not what the Rebbe wanted. And I could say it from our personal experience. As you may know, I had many years of schus to write, to be a chazer and a maniach of the Rebbe sichos. And the Rebbe insisted that we ask questions. When we didn't ask a question, often the Rebbe would say, if I bring it, 15 years, 10 years. Or I intentionally said something in a certain way to see if it would provoke people. And the Rebbe actually had kindness when we didn't ask questions. You could say, what do you mean? The Rebbe said, how can a chutzpah you have to ask questions? And sometimes even with the things that Rebbe said, we had to clarify in order to be able to publish it as clearly as possible. So we would ask the Rebbe. And the early years, it was like, it was a chutzpah little. It took time to build up the courage to ask. But by asking, we got many clarifications, and the Rebbe went deeper into it. Because the Rebbe wanted that from Das Tachten, the way we read it and we understood it as we were writing it for people, that should be clear. And the Rebbe said many times, once wrote to me, and Hanocha I wrote from a Shabbos Pasha Boy Tov Shemem. And the Rebbe wrote, this you think is a compliment, but it was actually not a compliment. The Rebbe wrote on top of the Hanocha, Hanochi milulis mamish k'moy ha'teip, which means a word for word Hanocha, mamish like the tape.
Was it a weekday Fabrik?
No, Shabbos. Why the Rebbe wouldn't write that if it was a weekday Fabrik? So the Rebbe, so that was not a compliment. The Rebbe would not be magiyat. He started being magiyat, and then he wrote on top. What does that mean? You wrote word for word what I said, very nice. It's like a tape, but it's not royal litfus. For printing, it needs to be written a certain way that people can hear it and clearly and so on. People always come to me with questions. I'm sure they go to others as well. When I listen to the tape and then I see the Hanoch, it doesn't look the same. Or I see Hanoch Bilti Muge and Hanoch Muge. What's going on exactly? So it's very hard to explain to someone who doesn't have the experience. It would be like, I don't want to, this may sound a little arrogant, but it's not really meant to be that way. It would be like going to a heart surgeon and saying, I don't understand exactly how you're doing the heart thing. It doesn't seem steams with the books. If you're not a heart surgeon, you're not going to understand. This needs experience. People don't understand that writing is experience. You can't just sit down and write. Just because you have a pen, you don't become a writer. Writing requires real work and training. And taking from the written word, making from the spoken word. The written word is not an overnight job. You don't just take a tape and you just start typing what the Rebbe said. There's redundancy. The Rebbe, for example, doesn't speak in paragraphs. Can you write the Hanoch in one long thing without paragraph? The Rebbe didn't speak in periods and commas. So right there, you have to already add to the written word has to be structured. Now, if the Rebbe added something later in the Sikha, sometimes it had to be moved earlier. You say, yeah, that's fine, but not for Tfus. Tfus has to be be'ifin that the person reading can read it. And the Rebbe was extremely upset when we gave him something that was word for word. He wanted it to be royal tfus. So what am I saying from this? That there's a mile and a makif, there's a mile and a pnimi. You need to have both the ba'uns and the tzavishonot. So what does it mean translate in our own aveda, our own aveda sashlichus, and doing the Rebbe's work? So there's a story with Tzemach Tzedek, with a chassid called Reb Aaron Belinitzer. The Rebbe cites the story in a number of letters in the early years in Tafshin Yud, Yud Aleph. And the Rebbe would ask, when people would ask the Rebbe for hiros, what to do, the Rebbe would say, Ki du asipur Aaron Belinitzer. A few places the Rebbe refers. What's a sipur? So Tzemach Tzedek would go from time to time to Petersburg. Petersburg was the capital of Russia. And there's Askonus, to make life a little easier for the Jews. Make it a little easier for them to buy land or to rent land. Zaydis and all the other tzaddis that they had then. Once it was a big important asifa in Petersburg. And Tzemach Tzedek Mezes Sibra couldn't go. So he called in Aaron Belinitzer. It was a chashiv chassid, a basechel, Chashid. and said to him, Rabban, I'm sending you my shlichus. Go to Peterburg and deal with the issues on my behalf. Rabban says to Tzemach Tzedek, what should I do if I have a doubt what to do? Like, not know what to resolve. Remember, then there were no emails and phone calls and so on. So Tzemach Tzedek said to him, you should resolve it with das atzme. You should figure it out yourself and figure it out. The Rebbe Marash was in the room at the time, and when he heard the Rebbe say, Tzemach Tzedek, his father, say, das atzme, he right away said to himself, he didn't say it out loud, obviously. He said, but Reb Aaron is maybe, what do they say, kricht avorim, like he's a little too independent. What kind of das atzme by Chassidus das atzme? That was his thought. Well, obviously it would turn out a lot different than that. Rabban went off on a trip, middle of a Suda, it could have been a Shabbos, I'm not sure, I remember. Tzemach Tzedek suddenly stops. Everyone saw he's being, Tzemach Tzedek was like in a certain, concentrating. And he said these words to Tzemach Tzedek. Reb Aaron matet in Peterburg. Reb Aaron is having a challenge in Peterburg. He's struggling, meaning he has a suffix. Something came up. Tzemach Tzedek was margish. Reb Aaron is having a dilemma. And then everybody was waiting around the table, including the Reb Marash. And suddenly Tzemach Tzedek smiled. And he said, Reb Aaron, he resolved the issue. Good. He was mechaven. In other words, he did the way that Tzemach Tzedek would have wanted him to do. So the Reb Marash suddenly realized, punkt verkehrt. He thought Rabban das atzmei. He was the biggest chiddush. Was Rabban was a bar seichel. He was not a puppet, and he was not an idiot, and just going on a like a meiser kof, like a monkey just following the shlichus. Rabban was bar seichel, and he looked at the situation, and he was mechaven to the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Marash understood that's a much deeper dargin bittul. Who's more bottle? A puppet? What do you say in Hebrew? A puppet, a buba? Or a robot? Or someone who doesn't have any seichel, and he does exactly what the Rebbe wants? Or someone that has seichel, and is mechaven to what the Rebbe wants? So Kamuvan, someone with seichel is more of an asoyan, because he could also, there's on seichel, he could fakrich and do something not according to the kavanah. But if you look in all the sichos about shlichus, what does the Rebbe say? The first thing, a shliach dav zayin bar das b'fnei atzmi. Bar seichel cannot be an eved. It can't be a ben. It can't be anyone that's meshubed in any way to the mishalech. To be an independent person who acts at his own volition, which means at his own ratzon, independent ratzon. And he chooses, but it's saying, what does he choose? To do what the mishalech wants and not be me'el b'shluchusei. To do exactly what the mishalech wants. So it means it's mamish a dover v'fuche. It's mamish two opposites. There's the risk always that he could do not what the mishalech wants, and that's what makes him a shliach, that he has that b'chira, free will, and yet he's mechaven and he's able to align himself to exactly what the Rebbe would want him to do. This is where Makif and Pnimi, Ba'uns and Sevishanuns come together. The Pnimi is that it's coming out that it's your seichel. But your seichel has been so aligned and so synchronized with the Rebbe seichel that you're mechaven. And the Makif is the keich the Rebbe gives you to do this. We probably shared this that in the last Baal Escha Nun Aleph, the last Baal Escha the Rebbe Leisata spoke to us. So I received that settle from the Rebbe then. That was really unprecedented and was not necessarily made me very happy. But today I understand what the Rebbe meant, which I didn't understand then. The Rebbe, that parsha, Baal Escha, is a very favorite. The theme of the Rebbe, the big theme that we all know, Aveda B'Keach Atzmei. The Rebbe said, Yud Shvat Tov Shin Yud Aleph, 70 years ago, Retzach Nishtayim Fegelech in Buzim. Don't deceive yourself into thinking, I'm going to do the job for you. That it's a Memani given an Edom, with them shiking Sovev, with singing Negunim, and so on. The Rebbe said, don't deceive yourself. Everyone has their pekel, their shtus, the lumazeh. The Rebbe said he won't deprive from helping. Basically set the stage, which would become the yesod of the Rebbe's Messias throughout, never wavered, that I meet you halfway. You need to do something, etzbektana at least, from your end, and then I'll give you what I have to give you. The Rebbe did not force anyone to do anything. I just saw it settled somewhere. Xavier from the Rebbe. I don't know who wrote it. It must have been an elder. I don't know. I can't even say who wrote it. He writes to the Rebbe that he wants a bracha for more Chassidus to the Rebbe. And he wants it to be, what's the lesson? He wants more Chassidus from the Rebbe, and being that the Rebbe's personality is a tough personality, should be Metech Yira. He doesn't think it would be Metech Av or something like that. So the Rebbe writes 1 and 2. Number 1, Metech Yira, Im Kain, Bevade Yesiv B'Yirish B'Teiro Mitzvah B'Yirish Shamayim, since he wants Yira. And number 2, he writes that Rebbe's personality is like I forgot the Lashon he used. The Rebbe wrote, in any market is that. The Rebbe is telling him, I don't recognize this person you're talking to, that I'm a tough person, so to speak. I never force anybody to do anything. So the Rebbe Haveda B'Kei Chasme. So Pasha Ba'aleischa was a very always the theme Shalheves Elam Eleho. We're coming from Chanukah. You light a candle. So the mitzvah is says Bahal Leischa, not Bahad Lo Keischa. Rashi says, what's Allah Sanedus? Allah raising flames. You don't raise, you light flames. So the Rebbe answers, the Rashi answers, because the mitzvah is that you have to wait. Kohen Gadol had to wait. Because a candle flame can burn out, split second. You have to wait an extra second until you see it burning on its own. So the Rebbe said, what's the Vesa Maisa? So what? Let's say it burns out. You come back and light it again. The Teves has to change the word and make it like the Kuva, that Kohen Gadol must wait till the flame rises on its own. And it went a deep sich in Ba'aleis Chanun Aleph, it's Mugeh. And the Rebbe connected it to Kol Avedas Hashem. The lighting a Menei, the lighting the flame is Chinuch. And lighting it Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, it's Shlichus. It's everything we do to inspire someone. The Rebbe said in Chinuch and inspiration, there's 2 ways. You can go and light someone's flame or ignite someone's flame. But it's not Elam Elal. You inspired him, but once you leave, the inspiration goes away, and he's back to where he was. So the chiddush and the mitzvahs, you have to wait, you have to patiently apply yourself and make sure that he stands on his own feet. The himidu talmidim harbe. It's a very big difference. One, you're teaching someone information, and the other one, you're teaching them methodology. That even when the mashpia is not there, he also can find ways to answer a question. And it's really 2 different drachim chinuch min hakotz al hakotz. That was the teichen of the Sikha. And the Rebbe went on and said the same thing as Lamaila. Do we have bchira or don't we have bchira? On one hand, if the Eibishter gave us bchira, so he's giving us bchira, so it's not really bchira. He also gave it to us. Is the Kohen Gadol is lighting the meneis. So what's a me'eleho? There's no real me'eleho. That goof is also coming from the Kohen Gadol. And the Rebbe went back and forth and back and forth. The Medrash Mi'ak Dimani V'Ashalim. If the Eibishter didn't give us life, and he didn't give us keches, and he didn't give us a klaf at film, or a semer for tzitzis, and so on, we wouldn't be able to do anything. So where's the me'eleh? Everything is coming from the Eibishter. What exactly is your part? Even the flame, when it rises on its own, if the Kohen Gadol didn't light the flame in the first place, it wouldn't be. And with this dakas dika back and forth, is it b'kei chatzmei? Is it the keches of the Kohen Gadol, etc.? So I decided, just for clarity, the Rebbe wanted us to ask questions. So I wrote up 2 pages of questions, which were all about trying to get exact chorkeit. What is it? What do we get keches for, and what do we do on our own? Shai Yuchad Amuni says that if the Eibishter for 1 second was not Mahav, Machayim, the world, it would all go back like Kedim Sheish Mei Bereish Mamish. So all of existence is basically Kol Keiche Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So where's there room for us? So this talks about, obviously, what is Bechira really, etc. Anyway, I wrote these shilas to the Rebbe, and usually the Rebbe would answer within a half hour, because it was always a Teves Harabim. We would then incorporate the answers and print the Sikha. Here, the Rebbe wrote on the side, I remember, he wrote, the Lashon was something like this: Kol Nesa is fathers who shall have a Selim Me'aleha, the Shelim Esei La'anis al Shaila Shalachem. The whole taken of this father should be shall have a Selim Me'aleha. And you're asking me to answer your questions. No, it's the whole point of the Sikh. So, of course, we all got it, but I wasn't very happy. Who was happy with that answer? Never got such an answer before. We want to know what the Rebbe's thinking. I'd want to go figure it out on myself. I wouldn't have, we have a Rebbe here for this reason. And I always wondered, why did the Rebbe suddenly answer this way? Kemovin, that was the fact of the Teichen of the Sikh. And it was only after Gimel Tammuz, which would happen just a little while. Remember, this was Baal Escha Nun Aleph. By the next Baal Escha was already after Chav Zayin Oder. So Chav Zayin Oder came, Baal Escha is what? Chedesh Sivan. Talking about Sivan Tammuz of El Tishech. Okay, half a year later. And then came 2 years later, a little more than 2 years, Gimel Tammuz. And then I realized, at least my feeling, what the Rebbe meant and why he wrote it then. And maybe that's why he spoke the whole Sikha, for all I know. For all we know. That the Rebbe was saying that the theme I've always taught you, which is Shal Heva Selim Elel, Aveda B'Keich Atzmi, from Yud Shvat of Shin Yud Aleph. The Rebbe said it wasn't like a thing that the Rebbe said in the later years. It was always the Vart. That there's a point where I've given you enough keiches for you to be able to figure out yourself, like the story with Aaron Belinitzer. The Rebbe was saying essentially that whole gufa, when the Elam Elel, that gufa comes from the keich of the Kain Gadol. So that's the answer. That the Kain Gadol is a tkufa where the Kain Gadol is the one that's pushing you, and there's a tkufa where the Kain Gadol gives you the keich to do something kav yochel on b'keich atzmi. So the Sikh of Chav Ches Nissen said 30 years ago, and everybody says, what does the Rebbe mean? We're going to do something the Rebbe couldn't do. And then you see the recording of the woman on that Sunday after Chav Ches Nissen by dollars. And she's crying to the Rebbe, and there's no question she's crying with Tanemes, like the Rebbe wanted people to cry at Moshe with Tanemes, the Rebbe said. She lost a child. It was right after the death of her child. She wasn't coming, and it was not a show. And she tries to the Rebbe. She says, Rebbe, you're leaving us hanging, in English. And the Rebbe says to her, if all of you can't do it, how could I do it? Bring Mashiach. She says, but you're not one person, you're the Rebbe. And what does the Rebbe say? If I'm the Rebbe, I'm telling you and you and you, and you have to do it. And then a second time, she says, yeah, we'll do. But you have to do. You can't leave us. What's going to be with my son? You listen to it. We have the video. To me, it's mind-blowing, that piece. Because the Rebbe, we know the Rachmanas the Rebbe had on a person, especially a woman lost a child. And you'd think that the Rebbe would react to that. And it meant it was so negeya, be'etzem ha'inyanim, that we have to do something, you, that even the Rebbe would not budge. Didn't give her one, like even a hope that he's going to do something. Now, the Rebbe is not being chaz v'shalom meneya, and doesn't want to give her some hope. But it meant it was so negeya. So the only answer is that this guf is the keich of the Rebbe. If I'm the Rebbe, I'm telling you what you have to do. You don't tell me what I should do. So we may never understand why the Rebbe in some way is dependent on us. Maybe the same way the Eibishter is also dependent on us, Kavyoch. But the point I'm making here is that there's an inyan that has to come from a das tachten that is not just coming from a keich elyon, something that we must do. So on one hand, it'd be much easier if the Rebbe just did it for us. But on the other hand, what the Rebbe said, I go back to the words, Lebediker, or noch mehr starker, and noch mehr aktiv, Ba'uns and zwischen uns. So I was explaining what Ba'uns and zwischen uns means, that you have the Rebbe working Ba'uns and he's working zwischen uns, which means You may not even feel that is the Rebbe, but he's really working with you, and your keiches that you have, like Aaron Belinitzer recognized, you have das atzmi, but the das atzmi is mechuven to what the Rebbe wants. So which one's deeper? When you feel the Rebbe's keich, or you feel it's yours, but you know that behind the scenes, even though you're not margish, it's really the Rebbe's keich. So you could the answer really is that you need both. That's the fact. At times you need the gili, knowing it's coming from a higher place, but sometimes you need, like the Rebbe explains, the difference between Mishnah Torah and the four Chamoshim. Mishnah Torah mepi Meisha. Why can't it be pi Hashem? Because there's a mitzad dira b'tachtenim. You have to have something from the tachtenim. Obviously, it'd be a lot easier if it all comes Memaleh. It's not the way it was meant to be. So we're sitting here on Teves, and we're talking about, our Veda, the nitzchias of the Rebbe's Sforim, the Rebbe's Torah, his Eros, on our connection to the Rebbe, and how does he make it more lebedik and more stark, more stronger and more active? Ba'uns and Sevishanuns. And we'll get to Durachun in a moment. But I wanted to say about active. To me, that word active, when the Rebbe said active, means, go back, let's go back to Chav Ches Nissen again. Why not? 30 years ago. What did the Rebbe say there? If you remember the earlier part of the Sikha, the Rebbe says, "Was will man? Zong noch Rambam, noch Biur, mit das Verschreiben, mit das Abdrucken, so liegen auf a Politzer." Which means another Sikha will print it, and it'll be on a bookshelf. That means not active. That means you know everything the Rebbe says. Like they say, there are people who know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. You can know everything the Rebbe said and be the biggest makusha in every possible way, but you're not an active person. You're lazy, good for nothing, you do nothing. I don't mean anybody specific. That means, yes, it's an Indian, it's there, but active means action, action-oriented, action-based. And as I said before, if you're talking about Memaleh, Sovev, and Atzmus, Directives is not just Hamshachas Ha'eris and Kabbalah's Hakelim. It means that Atzmus lies in an action, that one action, one activity, one to sein active means action. I've seen traveling around shluchim. I've seen shluchim that are big maskilim and avdim and big bali milas and midis gedelis. They have all kinds of qualities. And then I've seen shluchim who you may not see in Giluyim so many grace keches, but they're active. And that activity, I've never seen that. The ones that are active are more successful than the big minds and the big Giluyim. There's something about action that has a power. And we know the Rebbe's wishes about action. And I remember when the Rebbe, just as an example, I think it was a Memdalad, the Rebbe said then to print the Mafteches on Alter Rebbe's Mamorim. Mafteches Mamori Ad Murazok. So the Rebbe wanted it out for Yutas Kislev. Now Yutas Kislev was a week away, I don't know. So they wrote to the Rebbe, Memaleh Sefer has mistakes, you can make it, but if a Mafteches has mistakes, the whole Sefer is worthless. So we need more time, because you have to push the Magia, the Sefer, to make sure the page numbers are right. That's what a Mafteches. The Rebbe didn't go for that, obviously. They said, you know what? Print it as it is for Yutas Kislev, and afterwards, if there are corrections, you make a next Madura. The focus on action was beyond words. Now we all know that Rebbe was a perfectionist, and did not want a sefer to go out Biltimuga that's not edited and not reviewed, mistakes. But by the Rebbe, action was more important than making mistakes even. I remember as Shmuel Azimov in France. So the first time they printed a flyer, it was a big thing in the mid-70s or something. So I saw him in Crown Heights, and he showed me the flyer. It was in French. I couldn't read it, but I see two-thirds of it is printed, and like 1/3 the printer mistake. So the whole thing is missing. You can't even read it. He says to me, but at least 2/3 are printed. So some Ma'aser was done. I smiled, I thought it was a little ridiculous, but imagine printing a book there, a third of the page is cut off. So this was more than just a tikkun tos. But I guess there's something about action that has power, and I don't know if he showed it to the Rebbe or not. I hope he didn't. Maybe he did, maybe he should have, I don't know. And that's already another shayla. But there's something about action, and so the excuse, what do they say? They say this, I don't know who says this Pisgim, they say, perfection is the enemy of the good. When you end up looking for perfection, you end up doing nothing. Because so you get nothing. So better something that's good, even if it isn't perfect. So the point is activity. So at the end of the day, hey Teves is a day, I would look at it like a cheshbon hanefesh, not just for any yachid, for all of us, whether we are indeed fulfilling, that's, as I said, a simple question. Is it more lebediker and more starker and more active, ba'uns and sevishonuns? And that is the question. And I know the big question comes after, let's say, so what do we do? Everyone always asks, okay, what's the next step? So we'll say l'chaim, and then we'll sing a nigun, and then we'll go to the next step. L'chaim.
Hey, ya ba 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 ya ba ba ya
You need wireless? You need wireless here?
That's why we have it. You do it what?
Slowly. He came to the Balagolas by Memaleh. He came to the Andy. He came to the Balagolas Memaleh. L'chaim Mendel. All the Mendels. Yeah. Many Chassidus Farbringens that I've been to, at least, and the Chlau have this ongoing, I don't know if it's a debate, but it's an ongoing shakavatarian about the Maimer Chazal, Kshet Atzmach Tchila, V'achakach Kshet Achedim. First, take care of yourself. First, bind yourself, and then you bind others. The question, of course, is always asked about the Rebbe. And once the Rebbe established and demanded that everybody become a shliach, and even if you're not perfect, the Rebbe would always quote, like he did Purim Tov Shechai and other times, the story of the Mittler Rebbe. Mittler Rebbe demanded that his Chassidim that would come to Lubavitch for Yom Tov, for Shabbos, they heard the Maimah that when they went back, they would stop wherever they stopped. The Chazir Chassidus. The Chassidus they heard. And one Chassid came to the Mittler Rebbe and said that he's becoming, he's doing a good job and he's getting to his head, becoming a Baal Gaiva. So Mittler Rebbe answered that Sibel is off from the Vern, aber Chassidus aus der Chazir. And the Rebbe explains what that means. Even if you're a tzibula, which means even if you stink like a tzibula, well, Chassidus aus der Chazir. In other words, you shouldn't deprive others because you're not perfect. So there's that. So of course, then came the question: so what? The Rebbe didn't want any aveda atzmei. It was, I think, Aaron Belinitzer. That was the son. Aaron Yosef was the son, right? Huh? Son. Yeah.
No, yeah,
Sonech was the father or the son?
Sonech was the father.
And Yosef. Sonech was not by the Rebbe, and Yosef was by the Rebbe. In the early years. And he asked the Rebbe if what Chassidus talks about, the Rebbe demanded from us, Avedus HaTfilah is still chal. So the Rebbe told him, Sergonish gebitten. Sergonish nicht gebitten. In other words, whatever was it. The next year he came again to Tishrei, or whenever it was, to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe asked him by Yechidus, no, was hat sich mit Avedus HaTfilah? He said, Sergonish gebitten. So Chaz v'Shalom to say, like some try to say, which doesn't make any sense, that the Rebbe in any way would minimize or diminish the idea of Aveda, my morim after my morim, kuntresim, kuntes Aveda, kuntes Atfila. The Rebbeim talk about Aveda. The Rebbe is coming to take that away. It doesn't make any sense, obviously. And yet, you don't see the Rebbe focusing on it. And how many people really do Aveda Atfila in the first place? So the answer is usually given is, of course the Rebbe didn't change anything. First of all, it's Pekuach Nefesh. Fire is burning. You can't be sitting 4 hours under your talus if you see a fire burning and people are dying. That Pekuach Nefesh Beruchnius, that today you have a situation where the Chassidim and the Rebbe Rashab didn't have that situation, where you can reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Jews that don't Tenekes Nishbu, that don't know all of base of Yiddishkeit. So you can't say, I'm going to just sit down Baveda and ignore that. So first of all, Pekuch Nefesh is Deicha Kol HaTeirah. Secondly, the second answer given is that whole gufa, Teirah Achas, like mitzvah, like Eisuk b'mitzvah, Potem in a mitzvah. So if you're basic in the mitzvah, Pekuch Nefesh, and helping another Jew, and Avis Yisrael, you already also have the mitzvah of Tefillah and Avedas HaTefillah, everything that comes with it. And the third answer is the famous story with the Ragat that Rebbe brings a Purim, that by the Eisuk b'tzarchit tzibur is Teirase Mishtameres or Teirase Mizbareches. So when they came to Ragat and they asked him to become part of a committee, Skonis Siburis, so he declined. He said, "The Vilzach Nishmishin Svishna Machlekes Svishna Yerushalmi and Babel." What's the Machlekes? Machlekes is in Bavli. It says Teirase Mishtameres, I believe, and in Yerushalmi it says Teirase Mizbareches. So Mishtameres means that if you're Eisuk b'tzarchit tzibur, you're not going to lose any Teirah, but you also won't grow. In Yerushalmi, it's Mizbareches means you'll grow. If he becomes an Askan Tziburi, doesn't want to get into that. He doesn't want to lose. He wants to Mizbareches, basically. The Rebbe brings it in explaining, made a explanation in the last pasuk, the last pasuk in the Megillah Esther, where the Mordechai was Rotzei, L'Rei V'Echav or Kol Echav. So this was the Machlekes. L'Rei V'Echav, because according to Mizbareches, the fact that Mordechai did not go back to Limud HaTorah but stayed in the Heichel, in the Shara Melech, so it was at least Mishtameres, so they couldn't say Rotzei L'Kulam. So in other words, the third answer would be that by being Eisuk b'tzarchit tzibur, Teirase Mizbareches, so even our Avedas HaTefillah and our Teirah Kshet Atzmacha is also going to not be compromised. And finally, we know that Rebbe said a number of times to Shluchim, you go on Shlichus, you do what you have to do. And you also have the Keiches to daven in the morning and to learn Chassidus, and the more you do that, the more your Shlichus will be successful. And we see that the Peil Mamish, especially today, a lot of Shluchim will tell you that today, with all the limitations there are about going to shul, that whole model of just being a social butterfly shliach, which means you hug the people and you give them free kiddush club and you give them kugel, you invite them for Friday night, and it is not that simple. But to be a mashpiyah to people and to learn with them chassidus and nigla for that matter, I'll tell you that you can do now more than ever, and that will create a kesher atzmi. The social element, I've heard so many shluchim say, we don't even know if they're going to come back. Once they realize they don't really need us, they can get potato kugel without me, And I don't want to just be a catering service, sending packages every Shabbos. And I tell them, yes, and now's your opportunity to connect with their heart and soul, which is what the Shlichus was in the first place. So going back, this is all Akdamah to explain that last expression that Rebbe said. When he said, das is noch mehr lebendiger, und noch mehr starker, und noch mehr aktiv. And then the Rebbe said, bei uns, zwischen uns, and then, und durch uns. Und durch uns, zu jeder Id, und alle Iden, und durch uns, und zu der ganze Welt. So this is like a third thing. Zwischen uns and bei uns, I explained before, was the Makif and the Pnimi, the Rebbe's Keiches, our Begoli, the Rebbe's Keiches, our Reb Hillel, that each of us has. But then there's durch uns. Durch uns means that we have an achrayus now to carry this kayach, this lebedigkeit, this more lebedigkeit, and the more starkheit, and the more activity to others. Durch uns. The children's hour. Who's here? What?
To Biel's kids.
Just close the door, and that's all. You don't have to look. Who cares? Just close the door. Close the door. So Bekitzer. So Durachunz is a very powerful statement because that gets into the whole area of the Rebbe Shlichus. At the end of the day, even though all the biurim I just gave, but the Rebbe didn't make anyone a shliach to Avedas HaTfilah. Either because he relied that it says that already, the Rebbe doesn't have to do that. The other Rabbeim did that. But Bapel Mam is the main kav was the Rebbe was a Manig Yisrael, is a Manig Yisrael, a Nosiv Yisrael, and sees that Klal Yisrael is in the matzav of this alfus, like we say about the Baal Shem Tov, and here's Begoli Mamish, where you have, rates of assimilation 80, 90% intermarriage, Chmona Litzlan. And the Rebbe once said about the Frierdiker Rebbe, maybe this guy can just stop bulbing as if on the off. Why don't you just go out and bring outside? Even though being Bedugma Shalmailu, the Rebbe, people spoke when the Rebbe forbade also, so it's not like I'm not insulted. But Kitzer, the Rebbe once said very strong words that the Shver in Stott, I forgot the exact lotion, but the Teichem was in Stott, Gießen, Megala sein, the Pnimi Satera, and the Tifste Maimorich Chassidus, the Chmeser Nefesh, Lenin Akin, the Olive Bays in America. In other words, the Rabbein, you look in Hamsheichim, Tzadi Dalet, and Ayin Bays, and some of these the Rabbein pouring out the deepest Chassidus. And the Frierdiker Rebbe got involved in simply to bring the Olive Bays to a child. Now, the Rebbe wasn't saying that in a painful way. That's what's needed. The Rebbe is a Rebbe. When Moshe Rabbeinu had to be on Har Sinai to learn Kol HaTeira Kula, that's what he did. And when he needed to, he came down like the famous Sichas Simchas Teira Mem Zayin, and he shattered the luchas to save the Jewish people. So he became a person who went to save the Jewish people. You do what you have to do. So the Rebbe's main shlichus, Sof Kol Sof Begoli at least, was, like I said, Ba'un Sevishanuns, the Rebbe is with us, but the bottom line is Durachuns. Where are we carrying the Rebbe's words? And to me, that is the most important thing, especially today. Because like I said before, from the Sikh of Yud Shvat Chavov, in blunt terms, Hu B'chaim is telling Zari B'chaim, whether you like it or not. So if the Zari is B'chaim, then who's B'chaim? And if Zari is not B'chaim, the Hu B'chaim is in question. I don't mean the Ruchnis Einyonim and the Sherish L'mayla. I mean down on earth. The only way that Rebbe and Chassidus lives on is right now through us. I know it sounds like a sad commentary, but the fact is that's life. That's exactly what's happening here. And I think we have to know how to take that seriously. I remember a Sikha. It was in Mem Dalet, maybe, Mem Dalet. Probably around Mishpatim or Kisisa, I don't remember exactly. But I remember, never forget, the message was so, the Rebbe says, someone writes to me that someone's asking me questions about Mashiach. The Rebbe's talking about Mashiach. So he's asking questions. He's asking the Rebbe what to answer these questions. So the Rebbe Kedaka B'Kedesh didn't answer the question. The Rebbe said, schreibt zu mir, als einer von meinen Talmidim, Chassidim. He's writing, he's one of my students, one of my Chassidim. And he's asking me what he should answer. He says, what kind of impression does it make that people are talking to him and one of my students can't even answer a question like that? Well, how does that reflect on me? That's basically what the Rebbe said. In other words, whether you like it or not, you are making either a Kiddush Hashem or a Chil Hashem. If you can't answer a question, it means not that you don't have an answer. It means the person who taught you never educated you properly. You still do something embarrassing, you're embarrassing the Rebbe. And you do something positive, you're complimenting the Rebbe. Like it says in Sifri, on the Pasuk, B'haftas Hashem Elokecha. That doesn't just mean to love God. It makes to make God beloved. Should take what's the lashon? Huh? Shenesav al yodei, right? That you should make him beloved in people. When you see a person like you, person looks at you and sees your mamash a dugma chaya, what God wants, you make God beloved. Good, it's good we have a Talmud Chacham in the room. And a non of. This is Hechere Keches, Arbet and Durach there, right? Anyway, just kidding. It's only a Sifri. I can't say that, maybe you only know one Sifri and that's it. Run the Sichas. So how do you think about this? When you think about this, that we are the carriers, Durach uns. And that's what the Rebbe said, that Durach uns, jeder Eden, zu alle Eden, so the ganze Welt. I take this personally very seriously. Not just because I was a cheza and a maniach and I was in that position and in the public eye or something like that, because I really feel, Tehillim Moshe David HaMelech laments, how do you pronounce it? You know English too? Laments, yeah, good. He says the famous line, it's a tragic line, that when we cry out to God and say, Kem likmas Hashem, as dom of the art should avenge the blood of all the innocent people that were killed, and then it says, and how do you let the goyim say, Ayeh Elikechem? We cry to God, you're letting the goyim say, the goyim that did so much damage and so much pain to the Jews, Ayeh Elikechem, where's your God? Do it for yourself. It's so embarrassing. So I feel sometimes when people tell me, you know what, Gimel Tammuz came and went. Your Rebbe wanted Mashiach, it was very nice when it lasted. And now you're like one of us. You're one of us Orthodox Jews that like sushi and pizza and take care of your needs and so on. And we're all waiting for Mashiach equally. It breaks my heart because it's not for me. Say when the Rebbe gave so much keches and Mesa Nefesh, you saw the sichas, the countless sichas crying for Mashiach, Geula, of Chesnissen, of course, but so many others. And I say to myself, it's embarrassing. What am I supposed to say to a person like that? So of course I tell them that they're wrong, etc. But the Gully, where's your Rebbe? Where's where are the promises? So some of us actually have such childs. I hear it from our own. We know that the people have such questions. What happened? Where's the Dei Shvi? When is it ending? What the Rebbe's promises? What happened after 26 years, 28 years, 30 years, whatever. So the truth is, I don't have any questions. I have the question like everybody has, but I don't have an answer. And therefore, that's it. Some questions, you're not going to know why that God sent the Holocaust either. The Rebbe said many times that things we will not know answer. The Rebbe writes in many letters. Why? We don't know why. We ask not why, but what we're going to do about it. That's what an adult does. Look, I have a brother-in-law just died last Shabbos. You think I know why? Who knows why? Good people, tzaddikim, fine people, chassidus. There are tens and tens of people, karbonas, that fell in the last 8 months. Anybody who's going to speculate why? Ridiculous. We can't know why, God's ways. What we chassidim learn from the Rebbe is that you don't ask why, you ask what are you going to do about it? Are you going to lie down and die, God forbid? Are you going to lie down and just give up? So to me, not for our covet, for the Rebbe's covet. Like, for the Rebbe's covet, we have to not give up, no matter what. Even if you have sveikas. A lot of times people ask me, you believe everything you say? Of course, I tell them that it depends which part of my nefesh. Now, my right side believes, my left side doesn't always believe. Alter Rebbe already gave us a way out. The nefesh, the nefesh and abamis has its sveikas. Nefesh Shalikis doesn't. So you have to choose which nefesh you're going to go with. And the second point is this, that even if you have sveikas yourself, that doesn't mean it's not emes. Why should other people suffer? Because you don't know really why. Like the Rebbe once said, what's the vibe when the kinder schuldig adu has sveikas? So in other words, there's a certain commitment when you're a soldier in an army, and you're in the army, unless you quit, which is a whole other story, you have to fight the battle. That's it. That's what we were trained for. And frankly, even though we don't compare ourselves to the Rebbe, but what do you think the Rebbe did? The Rebbe Tovshin Yud came. It was the most difficult thing for the Rebbe. It wasn't a joke. like the Rebbe trying to not be, and he really wanted to be the Rebbe. The Rebbe was a private man. He was learning. He had his connections. He was a very big, but the Rebbe realized, some say the Rebbetzin told it to the Rebbe, what would be with Aveda, the Mashver, of the Tata. However you explain it, but the Rebbe, listen to the last minutes of Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud Aleph, 7 years ago, the Maimer. You see it from the tears of the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, alles was mit durchgegangen, darf das Echom, Mrs. Sadikim, Kesefes Beisalekenu, and all that. Clearly, you can see the Rebbe crying and saying, that he's doing it because of Mesiras Nefesh for Chassidus. You have to do what you have to do. The Rebbe said, I remember one Fabring, the Rebbe once said, Ich bin beteven nicht kein Asken Ziburi, nicht wie der Schwer. Der Schwer gewinnt Asken Ziburi. Ich will sein, sitzen bei sich in Cheder und lernen, a Rambam, a Chassidus, a Maimer, Kuntres. The Rebbe said it openly. That means he went against his Kavyochel nature, personality. Why? Because that's what's required. There's no games. There's something online. All the generations of the Rabbeim are online. Now, what Gimel Tammuz is, we'll never know. But the question is, are we feeling the same way? Is that type of achrayus? And again, it doesn't have to be about you. It's about the cause. I once told a guy that, we don't call anyone misnagdim anymore. The Rebbe said there's no such thing. But let's put it this way. It wasn't a chassid yet in the fullest sense of the word. Like all of us, basically. So he said to me, so what's the difference between you guys and us guys or something like that? He said, I can't speak for everyone, but for many people, I would say Chabad Chassid doesn't take himself seriously, but he takes the cause seriously. And by you take yourself seriously. You don't take the cause that seriously. And he said, it's a good point. I think it's true. And he was a Yerushalayim, he was a fine Jew and all that. So there's a cause to be, there's a cause. The Alter Rebbe came after the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. They brought a cause to this world. This last generation's till Mashiach comes. I mean, it's called Yefutz Manisachel Chutza. Taking Pnimi Satera, Terosha Shal Mashiach, and giving a taste to ourselves, to everyone around us. And we all have our laziness, we all have our nefesh habamis. But at the end of the day, comes Hey Teves. I mean, when else do we say this? This is the day that tests, do you believe or not believe in the nitzchias of this? Now, I'll tell you the truth, I have no problem with someone who says, I don't believe in the whole thing. It's much easier than someone says they believe and they don't do anything. Because then it's a bunch of BS. You don't believe, you're not doing anything. Someone has a suffering in the whole thing, and I deal with people, all kinds of people. Like someone says to me, I believe in God, I believe in Teres Shebiksav, I don't believe in Teres Shebal Peh. That to me is, I said, so you tell me you believe in a God, but a Teres Shebiksav that nobody could understand without Teres Shebal Peh. So frankly, that's just like believing that God gave us half of a manual. You can't figure out how it works. To me, it's easier if someone says, I don't believe in the whole thing, and I want to follow my Yitzhak. That's an easier thing to handle. You could argue about it. But to say you believe and you're not ready to pay the price for it, that always, I don't know, bothered me for some reason. It sounded like, the story with Shmuel Munkus. Ode bist a Rebbe, so then it's tachlis ha'emes, and then nothing will happen to you. And if not we're going to stay around. He said those words. He said, "Akundir akel in kop." So he said, "A bullet to your head." He said to the Alter Rebbe. It's not printed. They took out those words. It's too sharp. He said, "You deserve a bullet in your head." He tells the Alter Rebbe. Imagine a chassid saying this to Rebbe, because you took away the geschmack from Elam Hazel from so many chassidim, right? Because he was a real thing. Either you're real or you're not real. Obviously, Shmuel Munkus completely believed in the emes. That's why he had the chutzpah to say that, because he didn't believe the other option. But what are you talking about? It's not we're not here to a comfortable Judaism. It's real. It's all the way, and God will take care of you. And he did. Alter Rebbe went to prison, and he came out. And if it's not real, let's quit right now, and that's it. We're playing around. I don't know if any of you feel that. Some people don't like these extremes. They'd like, 1 second. Why can't I have it a little Tevel Shemaim and Tevel Brius or something like that? A little good for me, good for the Rebbe. I forgive everybody. We all are enjoying life. COVID, despite COVID, they're doing a little disruptions here and there, but pretty much, I don't think anyone's dying from hunger here, and I think we all getting by. Let's put it that way. But in Hergeshein Yanim, mean, at the end of the day, Ein Eid Mulvade, that's how it is. We have the Hergish, we might not have the feel, but we definitely know. I remember when, I want to say a name, one of the Gedalim in NYU, so someone asked him Pshat in one of the Sikhs of the Rebbe, Lech Lecha, Chelik Hey. So he wrote a letter to him saying, mainstream Judaism does not follow the radical view of Chassidim on God's omnipresence. You understand what that means? The radical view means that Eined Movade Kipshute. We don't go by it's not literal. It's like, it's a little, that the idea that the Eibush is taki here mamish, whether it's Simsu Kipshute or whatever he was referring to. We don't believe in the radical omnipresence of God. And by Chassidim, that's completely mufrach. If God is not everywhere, he's not anywhere, frankly. You can't divide in half and say God is only up to the Kiyah Shvi, and then from there on, it's in our domain. In a Movade, may be concealed. So, if Hey Teves is not the day to make a reckoning for this, I don't know when is. This is what we need to ask ourselves. And then, of course, comes down to action, b'peil. How does this translate into action? L'chaim, l'chaim. Yeah, it's an action too. Oy nanayanu, oy nanayanu.
Remember Tom? Remember, went to Hanukkah to buy candles. Very happy. This house is happy, but it's okay. One of the teams. Really happy. I'll show you. See if you recognize it. Don't recognize. Use there for once. Mendel Mintz. Mendel. Soll ich rein? Was ist das mit dir? Soll ich rein mit Teves?
Yeah, we got to get to action, right? Yeah, active. So to just sum up, Teves is far more than just the tzachim of Svarim court case. As I said, it's clear that it's all about the nitzchias of a Rebbe, what the Rebbe stands for, the Rebbe Belinitzer Chassidim. And I think it's important to mention, so no one makes a mistake. We're not talking about the nitzchias of a ish, boss of a dom, and a gashmi. We're talking about the nitzchias of Teire, the nitzchias of Teire on this earth. What the Rebbe represents is a mamutza machaber. It's about elikus and famous Sikha Vayikra Mem Zayin, which was also said just a little while after Teves. And it's the only Sikha I think I mentioned a number of times that Rebbe actually gave a compliment to the Sikha. He could deal with lasses that Rebbe wrote on it. I had the chus to prepare it. So Vayikra Mem Zayin, which clearly talks there about the nitzchias of Nisim. It was about Nisim, that why we say the Nisim, Chedesh Nissen. And he brings there the famous story in the first Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Reish is going Memaleh, which was the last Maimer that the Rebbe Rashab said in Tafresh Pei. The story that the Frierdiker Rebbe writes that when he was 4 or 5 years old, he was in his the Chassidus, and he saw the Rebbe Rashab went in, dressed in a garden, and he was standing by the table as if it was when the Chayiv of the Rebbe Marash, and he was crying. And the Rebbe says that the Frierdiker Rebbe brings the Maimer, that this is because the Rebbe's, even his furniture, his shulchan, and his kisei, all his chafetzim, kedusha le'zazim im kema, and he gives the example of Eidos and Kelim of Atzilus, that even the Kelim of Atzilus are also nitzim. In this story, he captures that. And the Rebbe told the story then in that Fabrenga, Vayikra Mem Zayin. So you see from that the story of Teves is about the nitzchias of a Rebbe. Now, when wars is Bavon, Magdim Refuah L'Makah, before Gimel Tammuz, because this is where no one had a question like that in Mem Zayin. The Rebbe is the Rebbe, Chaz v'Shalom. That wasn't even a shaila. Even in the court case, that wasn't a shaila. In the court case, Kavyochel, the shaila was whether the Svarim and the library is a private property or not. But in effect, if you think about it, and no one understood it at the time, it was really a question, like the Rebbe said it right on the spot. She said, the Rebbe Aaron Belinitzer Chassidim. It was really a question of the whole library. It was not about it was about who a Rebbe is, what a Rebbe is, and therefore, Memaleh, whose Svarim they are. And they're not the Svarim of a Yochid, because the Rebbe himself is not a Yochid. He is the Tzibur, and Tzibur ain't a mess. So right there, you have a psak from a non-Jewish judge that understood a Musig and Chassidus, and that none of us fully appreciated. And there it became a legal, and now it's a legal statement in federal court that the Rebbe belongs to Chassidim, and as a result, the Svarim belong to Chassidim. As a result, everything lives on, and nothing dies. Because if it's private property, it's the property of a Yachid, and the Yachid can sell it, can lose it, whatever it may be. So it established the idea of a nitzchis atera, essentially. Reminds me a bit when they published Torah Meaningful Life, the publisher, the Goyish publisher, William Morrow. So I told them at the time, it was Nun Daled. It was published in Nun Hey. So I told them, that there are, let's put it this way, some conflicting parties within Chabad. I just want them to know, because since I'm writing a book, it's going to be a big book. I didn't want them to find out in the wrong way. I wanted to bavon everything up front. And in case anyone has time, they should know about it. So they were part of a big company called the Hearst Corporation, which publishes a lot of magazines and newspapers and books. And I remember they smiled and they told me, don't worry, every day we get maybe 100 or 150 lawsuits about who owns what. And libel and slander, because you own newspapers, everyone has a time always. So they sat with me for a few hours and they asked me a lot of questions. Because they wanted to establish the Rebbe's Teda. Who does it belong to? Does it belong to anybody? So the first question they asked me was this: did the Rebbe ever ask for money for people to come hear his speeches? So obviously we all know the answer is no. Did the Rebbe imply that he expect money? So I said also no. Anybody could come in, yeah, Jew, non-Jew, of course, nobody. So I remember there were 3 lawyers, and one of them says, so in other words, he had no intention of monetizing this. It's not about money. So therefore, ownership is not relevant here. Because if the Rebbe made money from it, you could say, who's now going to make money? Who's the Yeder, so to speak? But the Rebbe never intended that. And no one argues it's the Rebbe's Teda, for sure. And then I remember the woman that was there, she was not Jewish, and she says, well, I see it, it's like the Bible. That's what she said. Nobody owns the Bible. The Bible was given at Sinai to all the people, and nobody can copyright it. And I remember I was like smiling to myself. I said, who would ever think of that way? Like, it's over Poshet. The Rebbe's Teda. That's a private rechush. Teda. So it's exactly what Sifton said. Who does the Teda belong to? Matter of fact, there's a medrash that says it was given by Makif Hefker, the Kavona. Why they able to give them the Teda Midbar Sinai? He couldn't take them to a nice city like Alexandria in Egypt, or Rome, or Jerusalem. Beautiful cities. If you wanted to give someone a Chem de Gnuza, a precious gift, you don't take them to a hot desert, Eretz Shalayosh Adam Sham, uncivilized, Eretz Siya V'Oyev, Nochesh Sovev Akrov, etc. We don't even know how hot it was that morning, but it must have been hot, based on temperatures in that region. So also the Medrash says, because the Eibishter didn't want anyone to claim ownership. If you had given Yerushalayim, you can imagine Yerushalayim till today, royalties for every time we have a share, wherever it may be. Malkim Hefker. That means it belongs to everybody. And it was mamish what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe belonged to the Chassidim. Means it's not even the gather of a Mekach and Memker in the Dinei Mominis and Dinei Shutfim and Yerusha. Because the Rebbe belongs to Chassidim, Moshe Rabbeinu. He had children, but he left them, they had the Tered Tzivul on a Moshe, Merasha Kilas Yank. No such thing as a Yerusha to family members. So hey, Teves is all that and more. But what it translates for us right now, and there's no question in my mind that whatever happened, hey, Teves Mem Zayin was a Bavonish for now. And no one should ever have a taina, legally or not legally, or philosophically, that something changed. The Rebbe still belongs to Chassidim, and the Chassidim are here. So Memaleh, Zamazare B'chaim, Afu B'chaim. And the Sforim are here. And it's not just the physical Sforim, it's the Teira, Memaleh to Chassidim. So it really comes down to this, and that's why I always maintain that Sikha, that talk, see, I don't want to say Sikha. When the Rebbe then yelled at the Bochum and all of them Negassen on that memorable day, what was it? Which day in Kislev? Beis Kislev. And you look at it, it's unbelievably painful to see. But if you listen to the Teichem, what's the Rebbe saying? This is the whole day is about Nitzchias through learning. Someone that doesn't learn and hate Teves and is screaming, Anatzach is mamish like, I'm saying my own words, it's like, it's push it like a merida in the whole Inyan. The whole Indian is the Torah continues on. So you're standing outside and dancing, Frierdiker Baich, the Rebbe said. Frierdiker Baich. Schoss nach an Land. Dreht man sich in the Gassen. Mit Zell der Fliegen. The Feglach. That's the Rebbe doesn't say that every day. Counting birds. That's the way you're celebrating Hate Teves. And the Rebbe could have said that any day. Bittul Teves, Bittul Teves. But Hate Teves, it's Etzem is that. You take that away, the whole Hate Teves is a joke. It's a hate for the whole Indian. So I say to you, and I say to myself, okay, here we are. We are now 34 years from Mem Zayin, when it happened. I was 30 years old that day, my birthday. I remember it, of course, very vividly. No one appreciated it fully. We knew there was something happening. First day, we also saw that Rebbe was very serious. It wasn't like Simchas Torah in the Welt. The Rebbe was not so, he read even the first words, Hey Teves Mem Zayin, when he speaks. You could see that Rebbe was talking about Atzmus Nefesh. No one wanted this. But at the end of the day, it was clear that something was happening. 7 days that Rebbe was speaking, and then the Sichos. So for us in the Geya, Hidol, Lepel, what's in the Geya right now? It's clear. The Rebbe living now with us, through us, like I said, Sedition uns, durch uns, and now we carrying the Rebbe to people. So, at some point you have to take off the gloves and talk bluntly. So I hope you don't mind if I do that. And if you do mind, there's always the door. Because I'm not going there so far. I did all the right disclaimers and warnings, right? That's how you get people's attention when they feel something controversial can be said. I wasn't really planning to say anything controversial, but I'll come up with something. We're talking heart to heart, Chassidim, Tradition on. Look, we all have our lives. We have our, the Rebbe didn't take away people's lives. Those that are married have their wives and children, Baruch Hashem. Those that are bochim have their lives. We don't have the shenis and the tzodas, I should say, that our grandparents and great-grandparents had. We have other nisyanis today. They're maybe much worse, actually. But like the Rebbe said in Chav Chesnis, he said, and the Iker is game from the Golas Pnimi. Because that's the real Golas today. We're not worried about someone arresting us tonight because we're sitting in Fabrengen here. Or there are anti-Semites out there, but we don't have Xeris that was 70, 80 years ago, whether Nazi Europe or Russia, etc. Today, the Golas is, to be honest, is comforts. Like the Rebbe said, Freiheit, freedoms. And it's much, the bigger Golas, Bifnim, Yodinish Benafshe, what I'm talking about. Everybody has their little Golas or deep Golas, but it's not as bailiff. You don't have anyone coming and shooting you. So you tell me which is a bigger Golas. I think the Golas Pnimi is harder. Obviously, the other Golas is much more, it's life and death, physical. But if you get eroded in Ruchnius, it's much, much more complicated. But comes a day like Hey Teves, and we have to be open with each other. If it's not going to be us, who is it going to be? Let's be very honest. So some people say, let's turn to leadership. I don't think I have to even elaborate on that, what that means. Whose leadership exactly? Who is going to be the people that are going to make the Rebbe proud and fulfill the instructions and the mandate that we were given? If it's not us, tell me. I'd like someone to give me a list of 5 names that you think other people are going to do it. The Rebbe gave it to us. And you could say from Chaim bis Morgen, mi ani and ma ani, and I don't know what and when, but the Rebbe gave it. And like the Rebbe wrote in a number of letters, a famous letter to Rebbe Zingarelli in English, where she writes to the Rebbe that she doesn't think she could do the job. She went for a shir in Tanya, and she felt she wasn't successful. They went on a shlichus, Tovshin Yotes, Milan. And the Rebbe writes to her, I don't think you meant to say what you're suggesting here, that the person who sent you didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know whom he sent, because that's what you basically, and the Rebbe repeats again, I don't think that's what you meant to say, that the one who sent you didn't know what he's doing. So whether you like it or not, it's not your grandfather and great-grandfather that lived in Lubavitch or wherever they lived in the world that's here now. It's you and I with our Milas and Chassidus, and we are the people that the Rebbe has empowered. And it's going to be very simple. Are we going to do the job in the best possible way without any type of limitations and create a revolution? It really comes down to that. You know, I never heard it from my mashpiyim, these words, but it became clear to me when I came of age and I saw what the Rebbe wants. It really came. Now, you can make the decision to say, this is not for me. You know what? I want a comfortable life. I want to build a country home. I have plans. I'm going to go to this place, to that place. That's your choice. But if you read the Sikh of Shmini Tov Chai, I mean, it's not even a question when you read that Sikh, what we're talking about here. But the Rebbe says clearly that we are soldiers in an army, and either the Rebbe used the word God in there, either you're roy, either you're ready to go in the battle or you're not ready. If you're not, you're not. And then don't you could say, I like to have a picture of the Rebbe on the wall. I'll sing Chassidus Shinagunim. I'll send my children to Lubavitch and Mezdis, and I'll give some tzedakah to the Lubavitch organizations. Or, which is, of course, the option is that we are going to do whatever it takes. Now, of course, the next question is, what does that mean, whatever it takes? I have no clue what to do. But you know what? All of you take care of your needs when you need to. You seem to figure it out. People are making parnasa. They're investing in different ways. So things that are negay b'nefesh, we're not just living in the streets and saying we don't know what to do. What do you do if you want to build a business? You bring in people. You bring in mumchim. So the Rebbe gave us a mission. He said it in the first Maimer, Bas Lagani, Dera Shvi, the Dera of Gula. Our mission is to bring B'Shechanti B'Seicham, just like Moshe did it, 7th generation from Avram Avinu. And then the Rebbe throughout, especially now in later sikhs, in the later years, so it's all part of the same plan. There was no chidushin. The Rebbe didn't suddenly say Dera Shvi in Tavshin Nun Aleph. He said it in Tavshin Yud Aleph. However, the Rebbe built the whole plan, and then he gave us the final instructions. Now, we hoped Gimel Tammuz wouldn't happen. We hoped Chazayin Noder wouldn't happen, but it did. So now here comes the thing. The Rebbe said clearly, Chav Ches Nissen, Behirotzen, the end of the Sikha, soll sein eine, zwei, drei, was uns zusammenreden, was zu tun und wie zu tun. These words you cannot change. They're not hearsay. They're recorded. Chlorah Diburim. The Rebbe called you into Yechidus and told this to you personally. You tell me what would you be doing? And I wouldn't want to hear that you say, I don't know what to do, so I went to sleep, or I went into denial to find other things because I don't want to feel the guilt, and so on. The Rebbe said it in Yechidus. The Rebbe said every sikha and a fabring is a Yechidus. It means he said it to you and to me. You could say you weren't alive, but now you are, and now you could hear it. So where's this Eine Zwei Drei? Where are they? So of course nobody looks at themselves. They look at others. Whenever I say this at a Fabrengen, so people say, you're one of the three. You wrote Torah Meaningful Life. I say, okay, so you're giving me eights what to do. But thank you very much. But first of all, I didn't do it either. I did some things, but I had no way. I mean, I'll say it, Ili Nishmase, because it was a good chassid. Motel Chaim passed away, COVID related back in, when it was in April, May, whenever it was, right, between Purim and Pesach. So whenever you see me in 770, always the same thing. He said to me, you know, du weißt doch, du sagst doch bei einer Bosse, bei Muchisch, als mit hineingenommen in der Welt. Bei mir, ich glaube das in 77, aber du sagst es, du fährst doch herum. And he told me that, he tells me that, you see the world is already conquered by Chassidus. I believe it, with the Munah Pshut, that's what he's telling me. So I always would say to him the same thing. I said, what about, I would say in Yiddish, but I'll say it in English. I'd say, what about the Chinese? He says, wie viel Chinesen sind schon da? How many Chinese are there? So I say 1.8 billion. Billion? It's a million. I said, billion. Okay. The Gela kleine Chinesen, fine. No, so I said, and what's with the Indians? So musician Allah is God. You know, we're talking about the Indians, in the United States. So I said, there's a country called Hedu, India. Before mentioned, 1.5 billion. So he looks at me, he means the people that do customer service for Dell computers, 1.5, the ones that drive Uber, you know, McKenzie nicht verstehen. You know, so I said, so now you basically eliminated half the planet. 1.8 billion, 1.5 is 3.3 billion. So that's pretty much, what's with the Tzveit? So he says, let's talk about the Tzveit Halba. Okay. So I say, I don't know how many people know the word Rebbe, the word Chassidus, the word Mashiach. Maybe you'll find. He says, what do you mean? I said, I'm not trying to throw cold water on your amunah. But if you're asking me, I have not seen the Kibush Ha'elam Ba'inei Basar yet. As the Welt is great, the Rebbe said that. I have no problem with that. That's for sure there's an great. That we Shem Mavada given the Ali Berurim, thousands of years, fine. But B'Poel Mamish, the active, you know, we talked about this theory. But by Chassidim, sometimes we know the concept that Chassidus brings Ein Keach Haser Peil. So if it's already Bekeach, it's already Bepeil. You know, like many people say, since I could do it, it happened already. Yeah, but there's a big far cry between could and happen. You know, Keach and Peil doesn't matter. But Eber says Ein Keach Haser Peil. So if anybody's going to make the argument that we've already accomplished it all, that's just not the fact. Das Nachman. In Inyan, yeah, is it like ready to erupt? Like, you know, like you have the tinder of wood that's ready to ignite? The Rebbe said so. But, and here we are, we're sitting here, and, you know, I don't like to use the word ghetto mentality, but we're pretty much living our little bubble. And the question is, does it bother anybody? That's the first thing, it has to be in the gale of the left benefesh, should bother us. If it does, you know what people do when they're bothered by something? They do something about it. You talk to someone, you push someone. The Rebbe said that. That's the Rebbe's words, not my words. I have been to hundreds of asifas in the last 30 years about this topic. Everyone with good kavanas and good intentions. But I have not seen anything really take hold. And again, I don't think anyone has bad intentions. I just think that it's like, the biggest challenge that people say, I don't know what the Rebbe wants us to do. What do we do? What does he want? I have communications with individuals that give me a bunch of options of what the Rebbe may have wanted. And I say, so what? So do them all. The Rebbe said that a number of times. When people ask the Rebbe, what does he want? I remember Tzach that I was asked, and the Rebbe said, so 2 votes. If you have 5 different options, go do them all. What's the problem? You could sit and be philosophize and end up doing nothing for another 30 years, God forbid. So I say to myself, and I say to you, so what's going to change now? Hey Teves Tavshin Pei Aleph. That didn't happen. Hey Teves Tavshin Pei, or Chav Ches Nisan Tavshin Ayin Tes, or Chav Ches Nisan Tavshin Nun Aleph, where they say insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So I'd love someone to say something that rebuts what I'm going to say now, but let me say my thoughts on this matter. Unless you really feel Meshugalei Sedova, I could tell you right now, nothing's going to happen. It does not happen on its own. You know, the Eibishter could have Rachmanis on all of us, and the Rebbe could have Rachmanis and bring Mashiach tonight, and that would be beautiful, and we all would love it. But we weren't trained to wait for that. We have to still do what we have to do. We can't say, you know what, I'll hope for that. That's not the way the Rebbe trained us. So unless you're crazy for it, and you really feel it bothers you, I mean, I don't know anyone that loses sleep that Mashiach didn't come. Fine. That I understand, because, you know, we're comfortable. But we can lose sleep by the fact that the Rebbe's mission that he gave me and you wasn't fulfilled. That's something that's more capable for us to understand. And I say it, Hey Teves, I'm not just saying this, we could say this at any Frierdiker, but that's what Hey Teves is about. Is the Rebbe and what he represents, and his Teira and his Heiros, Nitzchim, are they more Lebediker, more starker, more active by us, zwischen uns und durch uns, to the whole world, to everyone and to the whole world. So I can give you thoughts. I've already done this every year. Shmuley Butler invites me, we come Frierdiker, and I always talk about this. It's almost you could replay last year's Frierdiker when it comes to this topic, at least. The reason I begin with the earlier things, because I know people say, you know what, I heard this already last year, so I had to give some new chidushim, obviously. to make it a little dramatic and interesting. But the real punchline is this. So what are we going to do? Now, I don't even have the guts to say this, but I would say it, that because I don't feel I'm the leader here, but since I have the microphone, let's put it that way, I would say the following, if the Rebbe was sitting here with us right now and he would say, I'm not going to leave this room until you tell me what you're ready to do, or leave the room because you're not ready to do anything. What would you guys do? Would you stay or would you leave? That's the question. What do you think? I know no one's going to say they would leave, but let's be honest. You have to look at yourself because it's not just about hanging around the room, it's talking about some action. So I don't know. I mean, I will say that I have no doubt that the Rebbe is ausbavont, and the excuse that we don't know what to do is not an excuse in my opinion at all, because I don't know how to do heart surgery, but I know how to find a heart surgeon. And I don't know law and accounting, but I know how to find a lawyer and accountant. So the excuse that we don't know what to do. So find someone that does and work with them. We all have different strengths. There's a lot of things we don't know what to do, how to do. So you bring someone if you care. So then, of course, comes the big issue. The sheikh is embroiled with all kinds of machlekes. As soon as you bring it up, this one has, okay, we're going to talk about Yechin now, until the Rebbe is alive. And then the Shluchim have this problem with that, and this ones have the other problem. And we get stuck with this machlekes that doesn't bring anywhere. So then you have to ask yourself, so one second, we know that the Rebbe said, if something ends up that it doesn't bring Ma'aseh B'Peil, means the whole thing is from the Yetzer Hara. So both sides basically are contributing to something that's Hepech HaKavanah. So that's for sure not right. So can't we find a third approach that is like more mechuven to what the Rebbe wants? So to me, I would say the following, and I'm going to talk about action, because I know I've just been so far critical. Let's talk positive now. So here's a few things I would say. Based on the Rebbe's words, that we have to be noch mehr lebendiger, and noch mehr starker, and noch mehr aktiv. Bei uns, zwischen uns und durch uns, to everybody. So it comes down to really what are practical things that one can do. And I'll just point out a few things that I think are necessary. Without that, I don't think we're getting anywhere. First of all, simas lev. If you don't think this is relevant to you, I think you should just sign resignation papers that this is not for you and go find yourself, do something else. You have to believe firmly that the Rebbe called you in personally and said this to you, and it's your shlichus. As soon as you don't say that, then right, of course you're not going to do anything, because you'll say it's someone else's shlichus. It's not my problem. So the first thing has to be your problem. And that is, I think, a tremendous step, because if you feel that way, you're going to do something about it. And I don't just mean tonight, something that's ongoing. The second thing is, the Rebbe never said, the Rebbe wanted one plan, he would have said it. He could have said, do this, and that's it. Miftzah Tefillin, the Rebbe said what to do. Miftzah Mezuzah said what to do. He never said here one thing to do. He said some general guidelines, which I'll share in a moment, but he said it. So therefore you have to say, as soon as he said tut also sekent, he meant it's a multi-pronged strategy. That's what the words mean in Yiddish. Tut also sekent means there's a lot of things you can do and do everything possible. You attack it from every approach. Anyone that knows the Havdil marketing knows there's no one plan. You attack it from different angles. You attack audiences and target audiences different ways until you get what you want to get done. And you test things. Some things work better, some things work worse. Some things work good for some people, some work good for other things. The Rebbe made it very clear that it has to be be'efon hamiskabel, which means it has to be speak to the language. You can't speak to 5-year-olds the way you speak to 20-year-olds. You can't speak to a secular person the way you speak to a frum person. That's basic communication issues. So in other words, it has to have a diverse strategy. Now, the next thing, there's the inyan of Golas. There's the thing, the Golas Pnimi I spoke about, which I think is really about simas lev, getting yourself awake. But look, is it about Aveda Pnimius that you should be more Mashiachic, more Guladik? Obviously, that's a given. The more you are, the better it is. But I said earlier, the Rebbe never made it tonight that you have to be you have to be complete perfa beinani before you talk to others. There's nowhere from the Rebbe such a condition. So therefore, you have to say that there's things we have to do personally, which may be harder, frankly. To go daven ba'aveda and cry ad mosai metanemis may not be that easy, because if you're the houses by them, the houses. But it's easier to talk to others about it. Okay, so then the communication to others. So what does that mean? Is it communication to people in your community in 770, or is it people outside? Today with technology, you can reach anyone. So from the point of view of reaching people, we have no Hagbolas. The Rebbe, before Tafshin and Dalet, there was no internet. The whole website began around Nun Dalet. There was internet, but there was no websites. So right now, the ability to reach people is absolutely, that's definitely not an excuse. If someone had asked how to do this 40 years ago, you'd have to spend billions of dollars to reach many people. Today, you don't have to spend anything. It could be free almost to reach many people. So there's a global side to it, which is things that really reach a lot of people, but there's also a smaller side to it. It could reach 50 people. It could be like a chain letter, like the Rebbe once spoke about. Chain letter about Mashiach, that people should write to each other and they should write further. So what I'm trying to say is they just put your head, and I'm just speaking off the bat here. You just put your head to it. You can come up with 10 strategies right now. And you can start them right tonight even tomorrow morning. So the excuse that there's nothing to do, there's plenty to do. So you'll say, okay, so what are we supposed to be communicating to people? So first of all, the Rebbe himself gave us words. But when he was asked by CNN what to do, he said, Mashiach is on his way, and we can speed up his arrival through acts of goodness and kindness. The Rebbe himself, his own words. That was his message to the world. So and everyone thinks goodness and kindness. I know I've heard from a lot of people. It sounds like, what is goodness and big thing, goodness and kindness? Yeah, but the Rebbe, who we believe in as a godly person, that's the words he used, goodness and kindness. That means that it has in it a lot of potency and power. And that you can create a global movement around goodness and kindness, just that. Tzedek and Yeshu, whatever words, and how you analyze goodness and kindness. Okay, now comes the second thing that Rebbe said. When he spoke to this Pasha Sazrim, would say that after the Chavches Nissen, everyone was writing to the Rebbe all kinds of answers, and the Rebbe said, Alle wilde Wegen, the Rebbe said, wild ways. It said, Derech Yeshara, Lilmed in Yoni Gula Mashiach, to become aware what's Gula Mashiach, and to live by it. So here comes the question, which may be the hardest one. Do we even know what means Gula Mashiach, and do we know how to live by it? So the question I always ask people is a very simple one. If Mashiach came tonight, I know the Bali Halach will say it doesn't come at night, so let's say tomorrow morning, okay? Just avoid that. If Mashiach came tomorrow morning, tell me, what would happen? Can anyone give me a cohesive, normal picture of what would be going on, let's say, on Eastern Parkway and Kingston Avenue? Would the stores close? Would the birds stop singing? Would there be a pizza shop open? Could we buy sushi? What would happen? Would we all go to Israel? Would we see Neshamas Begufim walking down Eastern Parkway from Montefiore Cemetery? What would happen? Can anybody give a picture a little? Now, most people don't have an answer. You know why? Because we didn't think about it. The whole of Chassidus is coming to teach us how to be mitzayer. What means Elokus be'elam hazeh? And that's what Mashiach is. That's what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. The Rambam says, I'm not talking about the second Tkufa or later Tkufas. Not even talking about Nisim. The Derech HaTeva. If you cannot envision it, how could you work towards something you can't even imagine? Mifsad film, it was very clear. Reaches many men and boys after Bar Mitzvah, put on film. And the vision is straight. If you can reach every Jewish man and boy after Bar Mitzvah, imagine that. Every person on earth, every karakafta would put on film. Have we reached everyone? No, but in Indian, it's doable as much as possible. With Mashiach Geula, what's the goal? What are you supposed to? And if you can't paint the picture for yourself, how exactly are you going to paint it for your chaverim, and definitely for people who are secular, or for your children and so on? So what means Lil Mediyan Geula Mashiach? Just like it talks about Shleshim Yom Kedem Achag, Lemdim Hilchas Achag. Why? Why do you have to learn Pesach 30 days before? You can't wait? Because Pesach is a complicated Yom Tov, and if you don't know beforehand what to do, you're not going to be able to be Mekayim the Yom Tov properly. Same thing with other. It's simple. In simple English, it means you're not going to get it. If you were invited tomorrow, this week, to make a presentation before a bigger venture capitalist who can give you $1 billion to start your business, what are you going to do? You're not going to wait till the last second and walk in. You're going to prepare. You're going to work your thing off, to prepare a proper presentation. You're going to do research, it's called. Just like how could you talk about and bring and help people understand and bring them closer to Mashiach if you don't even know what it is? And explain it in tangible basis. So there's plenty to do if you want to. Now, I don't even know what the next step really is after spelling it out. I have no problem. I mean, maybe I was blessed. God gave me the ability to understand it, to communicate it. But I don't see any reason anybody in this room or anyone listening does not have the ability in their own way to translate this into some plan. Now, you could say I'm busy with other things. Okay, fine. That's a question of priority. But this, to me, this is the mandate that Rebbe gave us. So basically, we have our marching orders. It's not like a suffix. It's not like someone said, "What does the Rebbe want?" He said what he wants. You could say, "I don't know what to do." So I really am trying to eliminate that Yetzer Hara now by trying to say there's plenty to do. And I honestly don't find this to be so complicated, really. I find it to be more problematic because we're in our comfort zone. Mitzvah Tefillin never forced us out of our comfort zone. The only thing it did was you have to take a little time off and go on the street, maybe a little uncomfortable, and ask you, "Are you Jewish?" And you smack the tefillin on it. Or Mivtza Neshek or the other Mivtzaim. This takes us out of our comfort zone, let's be honest. There's no way you're going to do anything by saying, you know what, I'm going to give 30 seconds a day to the Rebbe because I'm going to think about Mashiach, or Achar Shal Pesach, I'm going to talk about Sudas Mashiach or something like that. This requires real shift in thinking, shift in action, a paradigm shift, and that is not easy. To me, that's the ultimate challenge. We're not accustomed to going outside of the Gilus. So we have our Hergel de Kedusha. Our Hergel de Kedusha is everybody tomorrow morning is at some point going to daven Shachris, and then later Mincha and Ma'ariv. You're going to do your rituals, your Rambam, your Chitas, and whatever else you do. And outside of the so learn Perek Tezvav of Tanya and tell me what the Alter Rebbe says about Hergel de Kedusha. He calls it Lo Yavodah. Basically, it's not an Aveda, even if you learn 100 times the same Mishnah, the same Lemet Pirkei Meir Pamim, because it's your habit. To me, that's really, I think, the biggest challenge. Can we kick each other in the pants enough to get us out of the orbit of our own comfort zones? That's the Gereisha Shaila. Now I think we have to open it to challenge. Go ahead. You just happen to be sitting right in front of me. We know each other. No, I'm Negan, yeah? I'm not, it's not a mitzvah to challenge, but that's the way you get things going. You talk, you argue about it. I didn't do so yet. Yes, I can. I'm happy to do so. Since they're not singing, I'll continue. Okay. Here's what I have to sing. Sing a nigga. It was good to have a nigga. The nigga is nice. You have a nigga? Very happy nigga.
Yeah.
In some ways, I mean, always there was always an Yiddishkeit always had different Swatim.
Shalom. Dos retten in Dresden. Dos retten in Dresden.
You know, we Chassidus is about the Psari Ezel Lekah from my flesh. I behold God, that we learn things from Elam Hazeh. So in every progressive and growthful company has a department called Research and Development. So whether it's Google or Apple or Amazon or Facebook or all the others, Microsoft, etc., they have research and development. What are they doing? What does that do? Now, besides maintaining their business, they're always looking ahead of seeing new trends, new opportunities, how things are changing in society. Like now, every one of them is scrambling big time how to adjust to a post-pandemic, a post-COVID culture. And they're always trying to be like 20, 30 years ahead of the game. I actually was once invited confidentially to a futuristic lab of MSNBC. And MSNBC is a partnership between Microsoft and NBC. That's why it's MSNBC.
Fake news.
And I mean, I had to sign confidentially. I can't, non-disclosure. I can't disclose everything I saw there. But what I did see were people thinking ahead big time. You know, what will life look like in 20 years from now? So you walk into a whole different reality, virtual reality, with all kinds of things. Now, not all of it will pan out. Some of it will be stam fantasy, but some of it will be the life of the future in every area: medicine, business, communication, transportation. So there's an existent entity out there, and all entities that are thinking ahead. Now, obviously, they're not interested in Gilei Elokus. They're interested in profit, making money, but also they have to serve the needs of the people. You know, Google wants to be on top of the game for a long time. So they have to constantly be ahead of everybody else because there's a lot of competition. So you ask me how I see it the following. The Rebbe said in really Tov Shin Yud Aleph, But Tafshin Aleph, I don't know, and no one understood at all what he's talking about at that point. The Deir Shvi, it was like a Ruchnesdika statement, and no one knew what was coming. Shlichus, it was 1950, 51, right after World War II. Everybody that I was talking to were refugees. So it took a while, B'chlal, that you saw a institutionalized, systematic way that everyone's going to do this. But not today, that's not the case. Today, there's the network of shlichus, shluchim, there's the technologies, there's so many things that different people have done. So there's a very different approach today. So then the Rebbe in Mem Zayin, put in Mem Zayin, and then specifically Chav Chesnis, says the word Yirotzen soll sein eine zwei drei zusammenreden wie zu tun was zu tun. I'm sure that Rebbe may have said that expression before, but I didn't really hear it that often. To me, that's strategic language. So what's the tun strategy? So perhaps, and not say perhaps, I'll say bevadai. The Rebbe wanted a research and development company to be established. Don't call it a company if that offends you. So call it a meiset, call it an entity, whatever you want to call it. Call it 3 people. Doesn't really matter. We don't need a name here. To explore every possible option. To ask people, what would you do if you wanted to change the world? What would you do if you wanted to bring awareness to millions of people about concepts of Mashiach? Ask everybody. People who have done so in business, people who have done so in entertainment, people who have done so in the biggest companies on earth. That would be the first thing I would do. If I was completely dedicated, the first thing I'd get, let me call the biggest people, whoever I can access. How did you make your company global? How did Coca-Cola become such a powerful force? And they're selling shtusim, what David Raskin would call brain of Wasser, with a little fizz. How did you make that number 1 brand? And I would try to find the ways that are done, that mumchim that are done. Find language, find approaches, and so on. I think you're not going to find one thing that you press a button, a magic button, and the Geula is coming. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I mean, halavai, ma'aseh echad machriya kol ha'olam kulei. We know that. But b'derech hateva, that's not how we do a business. You don't rely on a ma'aseh echad. You have to create a comprehensive. And I would look at the different strategies, and then you prioritize, and then you raise the money, make a budget, and you start testing things. This has never happened. I've not seen it. Not only haven't I seen it happen, I haven't even seen anyone sit down and make a meeting like this to happen. I've seen meetings, but they usually die out as soon as someone says, okay, so do we say that Rebbe is Mashiach or not? And that's it. Then everything goes haywire. This one says absolutely not. This one says absolutely yes. And get ending. Base Research and Development Department, because they get stuck on one thing. That's usually what happens. So, in more vision language, to me, it would seem to be an operation that would be busy on a daily basis, doing things, testing them, seeing what happens, trying out new things, different audiences, different ways. I wrote a book, Torah Meaning for Life. One book. It's sold around 500,000 copies in English right now, translated into 14 languages. And had it sold 10 million copies, it would have made a big money. It would have been global because it would get much more attention. 500,000 is very good, much better than anything is done, but it's not that. Maybe there should be 10 such books, not by others. Books that make a difference. Books that are written for a language. There are authors out there. There are people who are very talented. You could find authors, but you need someone that's driving this. I don't know who's driving this. No Meshugalei Sedov. So there's not the 1, 2, 3 people doesn't exist. So you can have all these ideas. And I've shared these ideas before. I've never seen anything happen because I didn't see anyone that is carrying the ball, that feels responsible or feels capable. And then I don't know how much money some people will throw at this. I think a lot of the Moses feel they have to do something, but they're not ready to do what this is. This means you have to raise a lot of money also. But I don't think money is the mania. To me, if the plan is good, the money will come because there are people who care and will give. But that's what you need. What I said now is quite balabatish, actually. Nothing crazy what I just said. Not even Eretz the table. Didn't even get to Eretz the table yet. I'm just talking about the basic mechanisms, how you get anything done. And that's that. I mean, I would love someone to tell me what I just said is controversial. It's not even difficult to do. Why it's not being done? Maybe it could be there's a Maisa, maybe there's a big mania because the stakes are so high, and it can be such a gavaldik, geula that the tzaddik connected so and just doesn't let it take hold. I mean, I don't like to believe. I'm not like a superstitious guy. I don't like to feel that way, but it could be that's part of it. And sometimes I feel that will happen not from within Chabad, to be honest. Even though that sounds so ironic, that the Rebbe was the one, but it may come from people who are in the Seder that are not in the system, so to speak. Because they say you can only change the system from outside the system. It could be the system is a hell of a hester, an elikus and a Mashiach, to be very honest. And I say it on the record. I'm not afraid to say that. That's how it is. Sometimes systems are. Moshe Rabbeinu came from outside the system. The Zikni Yisrael didn't like him. He was too different, But that's how Gula comes from people who are not within. So that may be a factor too. So I would say maybe the people within have to think like the people from without. Maybe that's how it works. Out of the box. Is that clear enough? Or you need more?
Well, you didn't say the vision. If Mashiach comes tomorrow, how would it be synchronized?
Oh, that vision?
Yeah.
That?
You talked about the methods.
That's the easy part.
It's articulated for the people who
Okay, for you.
are.
I'll give you two examples, which I always give. I've given it. I'm sure you may have heard it already, maybe you haven't. There's a letter from the Rebbe to a guy who owned a laundromat. The Rebbe says, Nigus Kedesh, says that everything is Ashgacha Pratis. Everything is Heirah B'Avedis Hashem from the Baal Shem Tov. So there's Heirah from a laundromat. I think it was more dry cleaners, I should say. What's the lesson? So the Rebbe says, what's the chiddush of a dry cleaners? You buy clothing, you wear it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, depending how all about this you are. At some point, the clothing gets wrinkled and soiled and dirty and all that. So, at some point you can't wear it anymore. I'm not talking about chiddush gula, So what do? You either throw it out. So no, someone came with chiddush of a dry cleaners. You bring the clothing to a dry cleaners, and they take the clothing and they put it into water, and the water washes it out, and not just water, but hot water. And then you use the chemicals, mix it with chemicals. The chemicals take out the stains, and then you take it out and dry it. You put it under a press, a heavy press. And they have, voila, you have a new garment, like a beged chodesh. What's the hira? The hira is neshama shenesata bi tahirihi. Tahira, pure garment. But then life takes over, and suffering and pain and tzaddis soil the levush and neshama. And like you think it lost its tahirihi. So the Rebbe said there's an eitzah. You have to be immersed in ein mayim elatera, and not just mayim stam, but mayim chamim, chmimus, and baramkeit, and lebedikait. Then chemicals, each mitzvah is another chemical that gets rid of the stains. And then you put it under a press, kabbalah sale malchus shamayim, and the neshama is refreshed and renewed, neshama shenesat b'teheri. That's the letter. So I remember when I read it, I was walking up Kingston Avenue. I'm giving you my vision now. And I see the dry cleaners, the one between Empire and Montgomery, and the one between Crown and Carroll, and the few up between the President and Union, and then on Albany and on Troy, I didn't see them all in one shot, but I was walking. And besides reminding myself of the letter, which itself is a gavaldik hira, I saw the dry cleaners in a different way. Maybe the whole reason they created dry cleaners is to remind us how we renew neshama shenesat b'teheri. And maybe the same thing is when you look at the sushi shop and gumbos and sweet delights, whatever sweet expressions of it. What's the name of the ice cream place?
Sweet delights. Okay. Sweet expressions.
that everything in this world, if you look through the Geula, is putting the Aleph into Gela, not changing the world, the Rebbe said. In Achri Kadeshim and Emer, Nun Aleph, the Rebbe says it's not changing the world. You don't have to give up. It's seeing a world that is really basically a marshal for Elikus. Chassidus says. Now today it takes a lot of effort because you have to concentrate. But if Mashiach comes tomorrow, I think all of us will be able to see all the so-called the Keach HaPel Benifel, not in any miraculous way. You just see the world. All it is really a keli or a kili of Elikus in some way. And Chassidus, when you learn Chassidus now, it allows you to see it that way. The second story I'll tell you. I was invited to a conference, medical conference. I'm not a doctor. I'm not the son of a doctor. They invited me because one of the doctors, the hosts, the head doctors there wanted me to, he heard me, he knew me, he heard me speak before and teach. He wanted me to give a picture of what is medicine of the future going to look like from a Torah point of view. An interesting challenge, right? So I gave up. I got up there and I gave a talk. And I explained the Pasuk, based on Chassidus, that the Eibishter says to Adam and Chava, the yem ochal, the day you will eat from the Eitz Hadas, Meis Yomus, you'll die. So in other words, death, from a Teda point of view, is not TV. Du tachet. In other words, death would never have happened that Adam and Chava not eaten from the tree. And I explained what that means. Why? Very simple. A neshama is energy. Gives you life. The body is the keli. Why should the neshama and the body ever have to separate? If you put water in a cup, unless there are holes, or evaporation, why should the water ever have to leave the cup? And here, Kolshkin, the neshama doesn't run out of gas. It's not like a car and gasoline. Neshama has bleakvul energy from its source. So why should there ever be death? Why should they separate? The answer is because the body is punctured through the chet. Once you don't do what the Eibishter wants, the keli take is not able to hold on. It's not the neshama doesn't lose energy, it's the body can't contain the energy. So it's a pagam in the goof. So like an appliance, at some point, even though the electricity is running, the bulb will burn out. The body is subject to the elements, to aging, and to illness, and ultimately it just can't contain the neshama forever. Had they not eaten, there would never been a pagam in the goof, so the goof and neshama would be together. When we correct the pagamim through mitzvahs, loshen tzavsa v'chibur, etc., we ultimately make the keli and the air aligned with each other. That we, let's put it this way, our activities in this world are aligned with the Eibishter's kavanah, l'shamish eskeni. So then it's natural that the body and soul will return together. My deloy hava is for sure my dehava, like the Gemara says. So I said, so the whole idea of illness and disease and death ultimately are a result of human misbehavior, not aligned to the source. So ultimately the Chaim can't stay in the goof forever. So the medicine of the future will no longer have disease and illness and death. And that's that. I elaborate obviously a lot more than this to give more explanation. So I have to tell you, a very strong reaction. People gave a big standing ovation. These are all secular doctors. They never heard anything like this, obviously, because death is a normal thing for everybody. Everyone dies. So I told them that, yes, it's true. After Chet everybody dies. But in Indian, then one doctor gets up, one of the head, the real big doctor in NYU, and he said, beautiful, Rabbi Jacobson, beautiful, very nicely put. We all will look forward to that. But what will happen with us doctors once Mashiach comes? We'll be out of business because there's no more illness, disease, and death. So what do we need doctors for? So after the joke, the prerequisite joke, which I said was, maybe that's why you charge so much today to save for a long retirement, I said, you know what you'll be doing? The most beautiful thing of all. You won't have to deal with the pain of illness. You'll be teaching us all the secrets of God that are embedded in Mipsari Echzolika. you know anatomy, and you know neurology, and you know cardiology, and you know the whole works. You know the mysteries of God. You'll be teaching us Chassidus basically through the body. So you don't have to fight disease. On the contrary, you'll have that intimate knowledge that only doctors have. And astronomers will have that in the Tzva Shamayim, in the Kechavim and Shemesh and Levana. And physicists and every doctor and every professional will be teaching about godliness through their particular expertise. So this is the vision. It's even realistic in my mind. The only people usually will challenge what I just said is, but people have a Yetzer Hara who says they're going to look for Elokus. They want money, they want power, they want their Teves, etc. Yes, that's true. That's where you need a munah that the Rebbe said the world is ready. People are receptive. But to envision a world where you see the Aleph in Geila is not difficult to convey to others. Anyone I've said with these two stories I just told, nobody told me, yeah. I could see giving students a challenge and say, you know what, fine, I just described cleaners and medicine, astronomy maybe. You can find this in every craft, in every work. Even people who are business people have their way. The only thing that's missing is the Aleph. They don't connect it with Elokus. They only know their expertise in investments, in science, in business administration, in computer programming. You don't think, you know how many sikhs there are from the Rebbe teaching Heros, from computers, from landing on the moon, from astronomy. It's all dugmois for us to go apply that to other areas. So if we can engage, if we can create, for example, that all the students and all the moisdes from here to Australia, all over the world should write an essay. I don't mean put an essay, but or create some type of presentation, show us how the Geula will look in a particular area in life. People would start thinking like this. So, look, I had nothing to do the last 30 years, but think about this. So I have a lot of ideas. I do have ideas. I just didn't implement them, but the active part. But ideas are not lacking. And I'm only one person. I do think about it a lot, and therefore that's why I have an answer. I didn't come up with this over this second. But you got to get more people to think like this. The more people that think, the more we talk. I think that's very much part of the brainstorming. People envisioning it and then seeing, so how do we get from here to here? Now, how do we get people to think like that? I'm not saying it's going to be easy because, again, comfort zone. Who's going to walk up Kingston Avenue and think about what the Herov pizza shop is in Elokus? Not most of us, you know. I mentioned pizza because they brought pizza to our house earlier. That's why. 108. No, I was looking at the pizza, trying to find out what Kusha was at. It wasn't so easy. I think there's always something. This is L'chaim. Next question.
What you were saying before, you spoke to Shluchim, and they were saying they're not, now they're just delivering food, right?
Some. And they don't want to become caterers, yeah.
So LMI, what they should be doing?
They get on the phone with every Jew they know, and they should have a half-hour shir about how the Geula is going to look, or how you're doing.
They should be doing that anyways, no? Before COVID.
Halavai they do it. If they did it,
that's the whole kavanah anyways, right?
We know what the kavanah is. The question is whether they're doing it. The shluchim that are doing that are having very good connections with their people. The shluchim that are not doing it are losing it.
You don't have to be a shliach to do that.
And Nechanami, I just mentioned shliach because it's part of the lexicon, you know.
I'm saying now.
Of course you can. I said, how many? You can do it right now. You are a shliach if you do it. What's a shayla?
I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to get to the point. And basically, every shliach, the whole part of going on to shlichus now doesn't even make any difference.
In Indian, the truth is, you can do.
To meet more people.
The truth is, absolutely right. You can go now online and you can create a following. There'll be more than all the shluchim put together.
Yeah.
In Indian, for sure, not even a shot. Right. I could just tell you from my work, I probably reached 3-4 million people directly in the last 7 months. Directly.
Every time you're on Newsmax.
That's one example, but there's others.
Biggest growing, fastest growing.
Okay, fine, you know, but it's still not enough. No, plenty more to do. We're not close.
The thing is, so
I don't think it's going to take a lot of. I think you have to get the momentum going. I think it's not difficult to reach, but you have to get it going.
and people are more interested. Like you're saying, people are more interested.
100%. And I'll tell you more than that. You're never going to have a bigger wake-up call than this. More people receptive than that. Never. No way. I've been around. No, this is like, I mean, without the pain and suffering and death, the biggest gift from heaven. Such a wake-up call. You never have. You know, people you call, they don't even tell you. I'm going to a restaurant tonight. I have winter plans. I'm traveling to an island. I'm going to a theater. All that's gone. They can't even tell you that. It's not even happening. And they're desperate for something.
The only thing you need really then is men on the field, people to.
You need a few people who are just driven and they raise the money for it and they do what has to be done. That's like anything comes down to that.
You need a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that want to go swimming, but don't want to leave the house.
You know what? You can raise money for this. It doesn't have to just be volunteers. Yeah. L'chaim.
Wait. So the method of gathering, having the futuristic lab. So you're telling them that you want to basically, you're not telling them that this was going to happen when Mashiach comes. You want them to make it happen.
It's a combination. You asked about
So,
it.
to answer you, so you're telling me what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, what will happen?
God Almighty. I don't know. I told you I don't understand your questions. But you asked me for a vision. I gave you a vision.
Well, what are you telling us?
Now you have to bring this vision to people. You have to show them how to see things. The Rebbe never said to sit around and wait for it to happen. He said, do. Didn't he say 2,000 was a can? He forgot those words. That means there's something to be done. It's not just about sitting. Now you heard my vision. Now you go to sleep. Now bring it to 1 billion people.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. What's the question? I don't even know.
The next step is you said we're going to gather all the professionals we can, right?
I didn't say you have. That's one way. I can give you 50 ways. That's one thing that you ask people how they do things. That's one way. Yeah.
If their question back.
If you have a plan that you can bring right now to 1,000 people even to start looking at things in this way, and I have ideas for that too if you want, then start doing that. That's not even a question. You don't have to even wait for Asifas. It's a tougher push. If you can bring 1,000 people to see the world, to see the Aleph, how you put the Aleph of Geula into Geula, why wait? We waited long enough. You know, I'm not sure what there are plenty of things that can be implemented right now without even waiting for further strategy. If you want to do strategy, by all means, create a sifis and get your strategy going. I feel you're stuck between people who just are so 30 years stuck. You're just trying to figure out how to get stuck people out of being stuck. That I think is the biggest problem. So I'm not sure. Like in me, just go to any outside person. They'll say, yeah, of course, that's beautiful vision. I know people right now that are not even Jewish that are teaching people about the Messianic vision. And we're not doing it. So how do you explain that? Because they don't have all the, too many people pulling. What do you think is the minir, if I may ask?
What do you say about the word "kakoptim" in Jerusalem?
That comes to mind all the time. That yeah.
Like people were saying, what could we do? What could we do?
No, for divus hamtake can kompanish, kamatake gonishtan. You know what? I would just people like that. You either give them a plan and say, go do it, go implement, like Mitzvot film. You don't need a cup for that. I mean, you need a cup to put on film shadars, but I mean to say, but you don't need a cup for a person to go out and put film on people. So then just follow the Rebbe said us. I think if you give people a plan, I'm not saying the Rebbe said ain't it tzvei, he didn't say it's tasn't it. Because the Rebbe knew that a cup came to stone. So the Rebbe saw it like this. I think if a plan came out that anyone can implement, if a person has just a bittul to the Rebbe, he would do it. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a cup to implement. You have to have a cup to strategize. And you have to believe, you know. But I think it's completely doable that way. Look, I'll just give you an example. I mean, I hesitate saying this because it's like tooting my own horn. But I can tell you, I just heard it recently. I know shluchim and others, not shluchim, even people, who've given thousands of copies of my book, especially the last chapter, to people. Because they said, I can't communicate the Geula to them. But this chapter communicates it, and it said it had a very deep impact on them. So it doesn't always require even doing something. You don't have to be the brilliant one. So give them an article, give them a piece, It has to be inspiring. If it's not inspiring, people are not going to respond, obviously. But, and goodness and kindness, you have issue with that one too. To bring people goodness and kindness.
How do you take something that's fringe and make it mainstream?
That's why I said, I have my thoughts. I can tell you that I know a little of. I'm hardly the mumch on this. I would go to people who've done that. There are people who've made things mainstream. Every company wants to become mainstream. Most don't.
They're not selling what we're selling. They're trying.
But you asked me how to become mainstream. You're talking about how to do with what we're doing.
No, okay. How do we take something like teaching Chassidus and make it mainstream? If people are looking for that necessarily, those that are looking for it, we can reach them. That's not the problem.
You know the Rambam that says that Christianity and Islam were miyasher saderech? They brought it to billions of people. They made it mainstream. They made concepts of Mashiach, the Rambam says.
What did they do? What was their...
You tell me what they did. Figure it out. So you're going to need to study it or bring someone who's an expert. I would not tell you. I think it's a very naive and childish almost.
I'm not giving excuses.
No, so you need people who know how to do that. You're not going to a person like that. You're not a person like that. I don't think anybody in this room is a person like that. You need people who work at Coca-Cola or Apple or other places, or even have run presidential campaigns. They know how to use social media. They know how to use social media. They know how to use marketing. They know how to use the tools out there. So if you think you're going to do it, no. Find the people that can do it.
You bring ideas.
Huh?
If you're running a company, you don't know.
So you have to bring them in. You have to bring them in and ask them, pick their brain and say, and they'll ask you the right questions. And then they'll give you a budget. They'll tell you how much it's going to cost to use them. You have to be ready for that.
You give them the idea what you want them to make, right? If you want to.
So listen, so that's why you have people who know how to articulate the vision of Mashiach.
So frankly,
I mean, I'll be honest. I have plenty of patience, but you're talking like children, really. To be honest, really, like you don't even know the alibis. I see. Can you shut that if you don't mind? Huh?
I just did.
Are you aware of any of the sikhs of the Rebbe? How he talks about the United States as a Malchus Shel Chesed, a country that's the strongest country on earth, hundreds of millions of people, based on the principles of Tzaddik and Yesher Apiteh. Are you aware of these sikhs? Yes or no?
Yes.
So why wouldn't you just say, here's a country that's built on it already? We don't have to create anything yesh ma'ayin. You have to just bring these principles. You don't have to, you're already building on things that you don't have to convince anyone. The whole country is based on it. And the Rebbe said that's what you should do. So so you're not talking, you don't have to even start from scratch. How do you bring these principles to a larger audience? The Rebbe said moment of silence in schools. There's plenty of things to do. You can make a whole campaign just to bring moment of silence to schools. The boards of education. The Rebbe didn't say build new schools. He said use the schools and use these principles. Now, if you lived in the Middle Ages, where it was just a sicha, and there was no Malchus Shel Chesed, you could say, how can we? That's why the Rebbe Taka says that the mitzvah Seif Perek Chesed Hilchos Malachim was not shaykh then. You couldn't be mashpia on goyim. It wouldn't work. It would be a sakana, etc. Now it could be. So these are, to me, obvious stuff. I'm not even talking bigger scale.
Frankly.
So one second. So I want to ask you. So what's your response to what I just said?
I agree 100%. I would never say anything different.
I know. We're not having an argument. I'm just pointing out to you there's certain, like almost basics. And there's 100 ways to do this. There's no one way. You're not going to find one way. I really believe, and the Rebbe said Tut Alts, he meant it. He meant that you have to do a lot of things. You're not going to get it done one way. It's going to come from 20 different directions.
Yeah.
What are you missing to do? What is missing? Like, how come you have never even done it? Sorry for asking such a different question.
No, it's fine. I'm a one-man show. I have a team, but I'm pretty much one man, very spread thin. I live more in the world of ideas than execution. Though I have a good concept of it, I never built a real solid, focused. I do it more like a shell game. Like I have 50 projects that I'm moving like this, instead of one that just really goes big.
Do you have like a script every time you go on TV or radio? You have what the.
I mean, I have. I've been around. Have it inside of me. I know.
So you have like you have this message for the world.
It's part of my blood at this point. I don't have to have a script. I don't need a script. I'm good at spontaneous. I have the information inside me, and I access it.
You know you're going to cover those points?
It depends. If it's an interview that's live, you don't know what questions are going to be asked. You just have to be ready for anything. If I do know, it doesn't make that much difference. I mean, this is what I live with my whole day and all night. I'm a mumch in this. It's not like, it's like I know the approach. If it's a subject I don't know much about, I'll do research. I have the ability to do. But like but like the Newsmax, I have no idea what they're going to ask me.
Right, but even so, let's say on those things, the people that are speaking, I'm speaking necessarily what the guy's asking them, right? We're seeing all the interviews.
Of course.
They have an agenda they want to get to. You ask me whatever you want to ask me, I'll answer what I want to answer.
Right.
So the Malusi do the same thing. Right? They ask you about this. I'm telling you that vision.
Yeah, but you have to be somewhat in context. I can't. If they start talking to me about, let's say, anti-Semitism.
They want to know what you have to say.
Okay, so I say what I want.
So we're asking some random guy on the street.
So what's your point?
I'm just trying to say that. I'm saying if I was never invited to one radio, and that's Craig or Newsmax or these things, right? If I was, I'd say, okay, so what if I was curious from you, now I'm about to go on the radio and whatever give me a list of things to talk about, what would that list be? Not just whatever Dennis Craig has to talk about. What does he know to talk about? He doesn't know.
Well, I do best in my judgment what I think is the best thing to do. So that's what I do.
Not relying on the questions.
I'm saying you should do what you have to think is right, and I do what I think is the best way to convey what I think has to be.
That's why they didn't ask me to go on the radio. They would.
Okay, so this is part of experience, what you know. The Mashiach is not on anybody's real agenda, the topic of Mashiach, per se. It needs much more ACS and people should see its importance and stuff like that. That's
It's a new thing or a new way for moving in general, right?
It all depends if you're talking big scale or small scale. I mean, if you're talking about like a revolution of goodness and kindness, that's easier to convey. Everybody understands that. I mean.
Would it be a change of doing new things or how you do?
Why not both?
Both.
So, fine.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
That's a beautiful suggestion.
This is a suggestion. So everyone's wondering what they could do tonight, tomorrow, to change the world, right? Now it's like the whole discussion lasts 3 hours. So we can all talk theory about what we can create, but to start a message now, to start even 2-3 people, right? It's impossible. It's possible to get anything done big within a short amount of time if you're just starting now, right? So if I could, yeah?
What's your suggestion?
Suggestions like this. We were talking before about shluchim, more than half an hour a day with somebody on the phone, right? So such a message exists, and not only does it exist, we all know about it because Yudi Dukes is very sick. And he started a message, and everyone knows about this message. And that message, the whole task of the message is to learn half an hour on the phone with somebody and teach them Chassidus, teach them Torah, teach them about Eibusha. So my suggestion would be, if that's what Shlichus is, right? The whole task is about Smayonis, and this is the only way to do it nowadays. So why aren't we all signing up tomorrow, tonight, right now, to learn someone?
Jenna.
I'm all for it.
All right,
Let's do it.
let's do it.
Son.
jnet.org/volunteer.
What about seeking?
What else you can?
There's a lot of meisters upstairs.
I'm just saying, something practical. This is what we're talking about, and money that you mouth.
You're not hearing good night. You're not hearing good night. For me, every activity is good, and if it's a good idea, why not? Sure.
It's just a very practical suggestion. Instead of thinking, okay, what am I going to do, and think ideas for the next 2 months till you try, and then think till Chayel, They'll do Thomas, whatever, they think different things.
Look, anything you, and any way you can motivate anyone to action is kedai, for sure, and that's that, you know.
All right, good. You gonna do it?
So small.
You gonna do it? You gonna sign up? Give up half an hour a week to learn someone.
You shouldn't have mixed Directives into it because you made it like a pity.
I didn't make it there. I'm trying to say that you see in front of your mind.
He's saying
in
it's
your
something
head.
everyone knows about.
Everyone knows about it, right? But no one thinks, oh, maybe this is the way I can bring Mashiach. I can get involved in shlichus. That's the way I can, finally not feel guilty that I didn't get involved in the Chassidus.
Man,
No, you shouldn't feel guilty.
He's guilty. He's talking about taking over the world.
Look what happened in the room over here. As soon as you want something actual, everyone got
It's quiet. It's quiet.
As long as it's all
It's not on the center of
What do you mean?
I don't know.
I don't think anyone accuses me of not being practical and actual.
I'm saying let's push something practical. It's something that exists.
I do everyday classes that reach a lot of people. Exactly in this regards. I don't. I mean, so of course
push everyone to get. Not everyone's cut out to start a message or to.
I didn't say start a mission. I didn't tell anyone to start a mission. You asked me overall things that be done, and I'll be more practical than you. Not everyone's going to do what you're suggesting, but everyone can tomorrow and the next day if you're really committed. Hey Teves, we said was the whole purpose of Hey Teves is to teach, is the Rebbe's words that it's a nitzchias of the Rebbe, of a nasi, of the Rebbe's heiros and Teda, as kesher with Chassidim. So why shouldn't everyone tomorrow, even if they're not going to learn with someone online or whatever, let them send out the email or through social media or WhatsApp, something, a thought or an inspiration about Geula. This is even easier for people to do. People just did that every day, to your 20 people, to 1,000 people, doesn't matter. Your list, But as I said, everything starts with Simas Lev. I find the thing that people don't maintain it because they don't see it as a priority. They'll do it 1 day, 2 days. But if you want achlata, and I'm talking to everybody here, that to me is a very practical achlata. It's very easy to do. You don't even have to create anything. Just forward something that came your way. So there's another action. And I'm sure there's small things, there's big things. As I said before, I don't think it's one way to go from many different directions. Big things are a bigger strategy that take a bigger scale. But small scale is also, if you can get 1,000 people, each to send out, let's say to 20 people, that's 20,000 people. That's a lot of people. And you create the Rebbe wrote about, the Rebbe said then, in the year was it Memvov, about the chain letter. That idea. Today it's even easier. Then you send letters. Now it's all through email, through technology. You're familiar with what the Rebbe said about the chain mail? He's talking about a woman who wrote that was afraid to use something negative. They were sending out a letter that if you don't follow this letter, all kinds of bad things will happen. So the Rebbe said, L'mal Yusa, everybody would send a letter to a bunch of people, make sure that they continue sending. You can reach who knows how many.
And they did it, people did it.
I don't know how far it went, but yeah, it must have done something.
Yeah, forwarding means now you know how many times something's forwarded and no one actually reads it. It's still something.
Right.
Story in Dunkin' Donuts.
But don't do some.
Or you go with your car and you pick up the food.
Pay it forward.
Somebody knocked into the next car. So he paid for his own and for the next person behind him. They knocked into. He came to buy his things.
This is a big thing in the United States. Pay it forward.
What's your story?
No, it's a nice story.
Go to pay it forward online. You'll see it's a lot of things like that. It's like random acts of kindness. People paying for those that are behind them in line, so they don't even know until they cut there. It's a concept called pay it forward. Instead of paying it back, if someone does you a favor, do a favor for another person, not back. So it keeps going forward. Millions of people are doing that. That's a very big thing. So my friends, I'll say to you, we'll say a few final words here for this until we make a hefsek between one fabring and the next. Chaim. There's no greater schus and no greater gift than to know why you're here in this world. Nobody knows for sure why the Rebbe sent your neshama to this part of the world at this time in history. But the Rebbe did tell us, and that's what the Rebbe is for. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu's shlichus was to tell the Eden in their generation what their shlichus is. The Rebbe's shlichus was to tell us our shlichus. And he said clearly the shlichus is which means to bring Chassidus Pnimi, which comes, of course, with Nigel Teda and comes with mitzvahs and tefillah and everything, to the farthest reaches. We live in a very unique time. On one hand, as opposed to 500 years ago, most Jews are not begoli, they're begoli teneka shenishbu. They don't know much about anything. On the other hand, we live in very free times. We don't have the Gzeiris and the Chmonot Slan, the Tzichis, and the Redifis, and all that went on in previous generations. And like the Rebbe says, the famous Yutas Kislev Sicha, that the reason Pnimi Satera came in the later generations was for both sides. One, when the Cheshach is deeper, you need more air. And the second is Teimeh Chaim Zochu of Teres Rosh Mashiach. And Habba Hatalia, like the Alter Rebbe's mashal, that when the Ben Chela is falling in a coma, the only option is to dig deeper, and you have to bring the Keser Melech, the stone, the most precious stone. And we are the Shluchim to do this. We are here at Tovshin Pei Aleph, year 2020, going into 2021. Now we have a machla, Makif upon us. People are desperate and receptive and needy. And Teves is a day when you renew that Teda Nitzchis. The Teda is Nitzchi, the Svarim are Nitzchim, the Teirose Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu. Male, they carry Nitzchias. And the Rebbe is not an individual. The Rebbe Belinitzer Chassidim. So we are the Chassidim that are the arms and legs and the mouth to carry the Rebbe's message. It's really straightforward. And that's our mission. And everything else is a distraction. Those that are focused, you stick to this. This is why your neshama is here, Lamata. And you will be asked one day, what did you do in fulfilling this shlichus? It really is very straightforward in my view. The problem is we have a nice tzatcha keneged, Yitzhak, and we have all kinds of distractions. So Shebi Isa, that gives us all kinds of other options and other choices. But when we come together, hey Teves, that's what a Fabrengen is about. Try to be mechazik each other, Ishas Echov Yazeru, to be able to together, Tvei Nefesh Lekis, Afei Nefesh Habamis, because the Rebbe explains, that's the question, L'cheira, 2 Nefesh Lekis and 2 Nefesh Habamis. You have a Nefesh Habamis, I have a Nefesh Habamis. Why is it 2 against 1? So the Rebbe answers, because Ein Odem Cheta B'Leilei, your Nefesh Habamis doesn't care about my Nefesh Habamis. Your Nefesh Lekis cares about what my Nefesh Lekis cares about. So it's 2 against 1, and when you have more people than 2, you have 10 against 1. And that's the Keyach HaTzibur, the Keyach HaVaFabrengen, Haispatus. It's Kenuf Tomer B'Malach Muchol, because we have the synergy, the Ela Al Kolono, that's stronger than the sum of the parts. And if we keep each other accountable like that, the Rebbe Rashab says in the Cholzu, that when you want to make sure Achlota is implemented, you do it with somebody else. Because then each of you have to answer to the other. That's the power of Achlota Barabim. Because then if you're on your own, one day you get lazy, but when you're with someone, you have no choice. That's the trick of the trade for me. I commit myself to things. Later I regret it, but that's too late. Because I already have to give a share. I've already people coming. What am I supposed to tell them? I'm not available. So that's the trick of the trade. We do it together. The Rebbe, remember the Fabrengen when the Rebbe told the famous story with the Levitzer by Ditchever and the Apterov. I forgot who the second one was. But they made an agreement that since Mashiach didn't come yet, when they're in the Stalik, after the Stalkos, they come up to Gan Eden. They're not going to go into Gan Eden until Mashiach. The Eibishter brings Mashiach. No, but anyway, I think it was the Apterov, maybe not. I'm not sure if it was him. He runs up Lamaila, and the Rebbe Ditchev is telling his Chassidim and telling everybody, you're not going to go into Gan Eden, so we'll have Mashiach here soon. But anyway, it didn't work out exactly that way. So Levitza Baditcher said, Mistame, once he saw Gan Eden, he couldn't control himself, so he didn't stay out. He went in. They say then the Baditcher was nostalgic, so now they thought, okay, Baditcher is not going to do that. He's going to be stronger. Well, anyway, Mashiach didn't come as well. So they said because the Gan Eden must have been spread, he didn't go in. They spread it out under him. So he wouldn't go in, but he wouldn't go out either. So that was that. So the Rebbe said in the Fabringen that the only eitzah now is to make a neder berabim. They make a neder of kama v'kama, even if you are aver on it, you can't be matin neder without everybody else. So even if you come up l'mayla and you're ready to give in, but you made a neder with others down below, so you're bound by that. So the Rebbe said that. So we always thought that was like the Rebbe's solution. But I guess that didn't work out yet either. Yet, I said. Doesn't mean this I said. So then the Rebbe said what he said, as Talia knows. Tut also sirkant. So here we are, hey Teves. Yet another year has passed, and we are trying to change the reality. I'm already an older man, you know, you guys have got the energy, the idealism. So my goal here is to get you guys up and riled up. The Rebbe changed the world with the younger keches, and you're the younger keches. And that's the story.
If we have to work from outside the system is not very reliable.
It's been called dysfunctional.
Dysfunctional. So maybe we need a message that's not in the system to like MLC.
I'm able to be matzliach in certain ways, yes, because of that. But still, you see, I didn't do it either. So
or maybe build up the Mason.
Maybe. But that should be off the record. I don't think that should be resumed.
Well,
because now we're talking already internal business.
I think we can all these young guys have that young in your life.
Well, let me tell you this. Don't even think about the word. Don't think about the word. Don't think about the word. Don't think about the word Mason. Think what you have to do. Start doing something. Today it's easy. I'm telling you, technology allows such ease. You can do things.
Right, but why start from scratch?
I didn't say start from scratch. So bring together. Yes, I'm happy to sit down with anybody that is a serious person and interested in something. You put heads together and you figure out what to do. I agree, totally. I'm open. We've been talking, right? I was available. I'm happy to be more available. Look, stakes are high. I don't know, I mean, what can I say? I'm very frustrated personally, not in a negative way. I'm not giving up. But, there's so much, the Rebbe put a lot of things on, gave us a mandate. And the question is, what are we doing about it? It doesn't look good, because my other side says to me, what stops another 30 years from passing? And then you'll be Alta Chassidim, Alta Kakas, or whatever you want to call yourself.
We'll talk about how the Jacobson used to tell us.
Right, exactly. And great, we'll have a history. We'll have some history books.
I'm more worried, like you said before, that the recycling will take do it first. That's the biggest, that's more scary.
But scary? I wish it happens. Who cares how it happens?
That'd be like,
Whatever it takes.
what's the
Do I have to talk about every topic? I mean,
Was 30 years ago. This year is the year.
okay, so he wrote some pale.
Do you think it was talking about this year or was Tom?
Huh?
Well, no, Shirley Agili. You think it was talking this year or it was just Shirley Agili and Av and Hal?
It clearly says it, so why shouldn't we hope that that's what's going to happen? But the question we have to ask is, what are we doing about it? You can't just rely on Ha'aris and Ramozim and so on. There's plenty to do. Well, I hope with one of my Yetzim 11 Nechosim Alalev, the Preil Pulasam, Sheyifalu Biu B'Hashemim, and we should get off our, let's call it, our Acharayim, and bring Mamshel some Pnimius. L'chaim, good Yantiv to everyone. Yantiv. Anyway, I was going to say that from this. I hope you two were.
Maybe it was one way someone left from us.
Thank you. Nouveau All-Star.
So you're gonna say it's gonna last another few days. We'll need another few days.
No, I'm not. I'm in this business. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not quitting. Whatever I do, I will continue and I'll do more. You need a revolution. It's time for real change.
People talk about it then.